Attention was turned to Jacob doing his best to defend himself from a group of men. "Arthur," he called out to the cowboy who followed behind him. Arthur took his pistols out and made his way to the VIP section. "You want blood? Go get them, but we need Merlin alive," Colin explained. Kitty did not hesitate. She turned and quickly ran to help Jacob. "Thank you," Merlin whimpered under Colin's grip. "Shut it," the lion yelled grumpily. Arthur fired a few rounds, hitting a larger wizard that had Jacob in a headlock. The wizard dropped to the ground as Jacob coughed, trying to catch his breath. Kitty, the ninja cat, was quick. She sliced through two men before Jacob could even cut down one. The cowboy aimed and fired another shot. Another wizard fell dead. The club was almost empty at the point. The remaining wizards knew they could not win this fight, and did their best to run, but Jacob and Kitty made short work of them. After the last wizard fell, Kitty huffed and made her way back towards Colin. Jacob followed and stood beside the cowboy. "Thanks, Judge Jameson." Jacob thanked Colin. The two did know each other. Last year Raiden trained Jacob, and the two aided Colin in taking down the house. Afterwards they did not really keep in contact, but they both knew if either needed help they could rely on each other. Colin was the commissioner and judge that worked at the Black Files in New Orleans, and with Jacob being the main judge of the region, they were of equal rank. "You are welcome. If you would have contacted us, we could have helped you earlier." "How did you know I was here?" Jacob asked. "We didn't. Judge Montgomery here was tracking Merlin. He is wanted in Chicago." Arthur spoke up. "Arthur here is a wandering judge, a sort of bounty hunter for the crowd. He asked me to help him to arrest Merlin here." Colin kept an iron clutch on the male's collar. "Why do you want him?" Kitty spoke up. It was rare for her to speak, but she really wanted a reason to cut the wizard down. She didn't agree with the whole arrest and transport business Colin and Arthur wanted to do. "Raiden told me Merlin was in town." Raiden knew if a player like him was in town there had to be more to it. His suspicion was correct when I saw Henry Legnon Jr. enter from the back, and then exit quickly when he saw me. I have a feeling the two have business and I wish to find out. I am raising a case against the merman and his company. Colin nodded. He remembers Raiden telling him about the Davidsons and the Marine Spirits War. "Well, Merlin, it looks like you owe Judge Davison an explanation before we ship you off north." Arthur barked as he glared at the wizard. "I told the judge already. I am here to party, that is all." Merlin chuckled nervously. Colin knew it was a lie. He didn't need to use his gift of telling the lie from truth to know that. "So, you want to play hard to get Ancient One, fine Kitty." Colin glanced toward the tiny brunette. Kitty lifted her knife and took a step towards him. Merlin began to try and wiggle out of the lion's grip with whimpers. Jacob shook his head in disappointment at the actions of Merlin. He was nothing like the tales he was heard about. The judge thought it was going to be a great match to try and confront someone like Merlin, but here he was crying like a baby afraid of a tiny ninja. Jacob knew Kitty was deadly, and he would never think of taking her on, but he knew the woman, Merlin did not, and here he was bawling. So much for the powerful myth of the great Merlin. Arthur rolled his eyes. It was simply great propaganda. "Please don't let her get me. I will tell you, okay, Mr. Legnon. He wanted me to supply him with my magical abilities and knowledge to make something for him." "Make what?" Jacob asked. "I don't know." Merlin got loud, and Kitty poked him with her dagger. Merlin yelps like a puppy. "Honestly, I don't know. We were supposed to discuss it tonight." Merlin looked at Colin. Colin nodded. It was the truth. Colin set his attention towards Jacob. "Anything else you would like to know? Also, it is your call on what we do. We can try him here, or you can allow Arthur to take him up north." Colin left the decision to Jacob. Merlin kept his frightened attention on Kitty as Jacob thought it over. Merlin was no more use to him, and he needed to be questioned and put on trial elsewhere. Let Judge Montgomery take him. He is probably needed for questioning in other cases. Jacob put his katana back in its sheath. Kitty grumbled as she put her dagger away. Colin nodded and handed the wizard to Arthur, who then cuffed the man. As Arthur walked Merlin out, the others followed behind him. I would like to help you in this case, Judge Davison. Mr. Legnon and his crew are also wanted by the Black Files. I believe if we work together, it could benefit us and close this case quickly. Colin stuffed his hands in his long brown coat. Kitty went to protest as she growled. Calm down, Kitty. I have not forgotten about the Wendigo. I have a feeling if we can get a hold of Henry, he can help us find the Wendigo. Colin and Kitty had been tracking Jack, the Wendigo that killed Frederick, since he fled the house last year. Jack and Claire had been laying low, so the trails were going cold. Colin hoped that maybe Henry would have info on the Wendigo, plus he needed to bring that merman and his docks down. Chapter 8. The Docks. Henry Jr. boarded his ship that was docked in the waters of the New Orleans Port Canal. He had narrowly escaped the nightclub, but he was made. Jacob the Davison boy had seen him enter the club, and no doubt the young judge would be knocking on his door for answers. Merlin was taken, no doubt, so the plans he had for the wizard needed to be remade. The fallen angel Samuel had approached him about a month ago, and the young merman, unlike his father, agreed to create an alliance with him. Neff, his grandfather, was dead. His father was soon to be as well due to his health, so it was only smart to align with the fallen one. Samuel and his people were not far from this state, and when they would lay siege on it, they would no doubt lay waste to anyone who would not pledge to them. Henry's father was too old school and would not accept change or the change of the times. He was weak, and Henry Jr. knew that. It was the merman's time to take over completely and run this business. By allying with Sam, this was guaranteed to him. The merman and Samuel were to gather and come up with a plan to not only get other supernaturals on board, but the humans as well. Merlin would have been part of this plan, but now the judges had him. He would need to find another to help with the plans. One name came to mind: Giovanni Venture. He was a well-known doctor and scientist in their community. Last he heard, the vampire plague doctor was locked up. Henry Jr. needed to look into this matter, but first he needed to contact Samuel. He needed to update him on the current situation. The merman picked up the phone and called his new boss. Well, if it isn't my favorite merman. Samuel picked up the phone and began to speak to Henry. We might have a slight problem. Henry paused. Go on. Samuel's voice changed slightly from happy to annoyed. Merlin was taken by the New Orleans judges and Black Files. I believe I was made. The Davison brat spotted me. Henry explained. Just a slight hiccup is all, I am sure. The plan remains the same. There are many others out there that can make what we need. Samuel explained. My thoughts exactly. I am looking into finding Dr. Venture. He is not Merlin, but I hear he is just as good, if not better, than the wizard. Henry paced his captain quarters on the ship. I have faith you will make the right decisions. You are very smart, and that is why I have let you take over and remain in the position you are in. You understand progress. Your father did not. I also appreciate you not stopping me from carrying out my plans, and letting you father go. Sam made emphasis on the word go. Henry knew exactly what he meant. Let's just say, I was tired of being second. I deserve this business. He may have started it, but it was going under if it wasn't for me. I brought this thing from the depths and caused it to boom worldwide. My father wanted it only locally. Process wasn't something he liked. It must be hard living under that precious, and the mistakes of your father. No matter. You will not have any issues from me. You are your own merman, and I have great faith in your business and our partnership. All I ask is for loyalty. Meph wanted your worship, I want your loyalty. I know it is hard due to the fact they were family, but sometimes family is the worst to deal with. They stab you in the back and the wounds are deeper. Speaking of family, do you think your sister will be an issue? Samuel asked. I do not believe so. She never wanted anything to do with our father and his business. I do not believe I ever met her, but from what Henry spoke of, she is nothing like him or me. Henry Jr. explained. I would like to meet her. To extend a hand of friendship. Samuel thought out loud. Last I heard she was around, I believe she owns an art gallery. Henry explained. His father spoke of her often, but Henry most of the time ignored it. He had no ill will against her, the merman just had better things to do at the time. Although soon he would have to meet his younger sister if Samuel was successful in bringing her on board. If not, then she would die much like any other who would oppose them. I will be in town soon to take care of your father. Do not worry. Our plans will be put into place soon. Samuel explained before hanging up. The Black File Agency Building, New Orleans. Jacob followed Colin and Kitty back to the agency building. The three then proceeds to walk into Colin's office to discuss things. How have you been, Jacob? Colin was not as formal as he was before. They were not in public, so he was more relaxed. Kitty plopped on the couch behind them and proceeded to clean her dagger. Jacob sat in front of Colin's desk and sighed deeply. Honestly, it has been rough, Jacob confessed. Colin leaned back in his chair to listen to the young judge. After the fall of the house, I returned home to help my father bury my brother. Not long after, his health faded, and he passed. I am sorry to hear that. Colin spoke sincerely. Thank you. I try to not let it get to me. Lately I have been struggling with it, but I know I have a duty to fulfill. Not only as judge of this region, but also to take down those merfolk that have plagued my family for centuries. We are here to help you. I also would like to see Henry locked up and his operations stopped. We also have been looking for Meph's old allies, especially the Wendigo and the witch Claire. Me and Kitty were staking out the Coven house in the downtown area when we ran into Arthur. The judge needed our help to get Merlin. Henry has to be a part of this. I could not pursue due to the other wizards attacking me. He could possibly fill his father's shoe and grandfather's. Maybe he is wanting to take over the city in Meph's stead. Colin tossed out ideas. Possibly. I have been having dreams about an outside army coming in to attack. Maybe Henry Jr. is calling in others to ally himself with to take the city over. Jacob scratched his head a bit. We need to make a board. A list of all the merman's associates, allies, and business partners. Anyone and everyone he has ever talked to. Build a case on top of the current Henry Legnon case. No doubt Henry Jr. is stepping in for the old merman. Colin scratched his stubble. Kitty was half listening. She could care less about the merman and his people. She only wanted Wendigo's blood. The Wendigo. She spoke up. Colin sighed and glanced over towards her. Yes, him and Claire will be on that list. Henry Sr. and Claire had relations in the past. Claire also was Meph's main subject, and her Wendigo gave Meph alliance. 2 birds, 1 stone, Kitty. Have patience. We will get him and his witch. The Wendigo is just a small piece in a bigger picture. I know it is personal for us, but we can't let that affect the bigger plan and picture. Kitty growled and cleaned her dagger with force to avoid looking at Colin. Jacob remembered the Wendigo from the house. He also recalled why the lion wanted the Wendigo so much. I will help you get that Wendigo. We already have the right to take him in dead or alive. Him and the others who escaped the house that night. Jacob added. I know, it is just a matter of finding them. Colin huffed. If they are at that house, we can't just barge in. We have to have clearance. Well, I am the judge of this region. If you have strong evidence and would like to take a look, I can go with you. Bypassing that agency red tape and go full judge. Jacob snickered. He turned to glance at Kitty, who was now smiling as well. Colin Fassipum. Yes, that can work. I just want to get it in writing and logged in that we built a case in case we are called into court. You know the supernatural laws are getting stricter thanks to that congressman. I do miss the days we could just go after and hunt them. They came out of the darkness and allied themselves with the humans. We had to do the same thing in order to keep up the fight. Jacob shrugged. It was a bittersweet decision by the crowd. I must admit, I am not the best at paperwork and creating cases. Jacob confesses. I will have someone at records from the crowd come in and help out. The success with Samara helping the Austin branch led to the crowd recruiting, training, and dispatching others to the other Black Files agencies. It not only helps us judges, but the other agents. Colin explained. Great. Let's get started. Jacob stood up. Colin and Kitty did the same. It is going to be a long night. Might want to order some takeout. Jacob added. Hey, whatever happened to Laura? Jacob asked. The two were both just newbies and learning together. Laura, Charlie, and Goody went after Auden. Colin explained as he walked toward the conference room. Oh really? Yes, I heard they were successful in finding and killing the fallen angel. They were in the middle of mopping up after the Norsemen. I also heard the two were engaged. Colin added. Kitty let out a laugh and then grew quiet again. Jacob smiled as he looked back at her. Isn't he your brother? Jacob asked. Kitty nodded. I would have never guessed. You two are the complete opposite. Jacob kept a smile on his face. I agree. I did lose a darn good scientist though. I kinda miss that bloke. Colin smirked and held open the door for them. Although I do not miss the crazy screaming and him and Edwards going at it constantly. Colin waited for Kitty and Jacob to enter before following them inside. Kitty walked to the other side of the room and wheeled over a blank board for them to get started on. Colin unbuttoned his sleeves and rolled them up. He then undid his red tie and tossed it on the chair. Jacob noticed the large boxes already on the table inside. I see you started. Jacob asked. Yes, but this is just the info we have on Meth, Claire and the Wendigo. I need to get more files on Henry and his son. We have some stuff on when Laura and Goody took pictures last year, but I am sure there have been updates since then. We desperately need a record keeper to log this in our computer system and file this. Colin sighed. Jacob frowned a bit. The massive amount of paperwork they would have to go through was going to be ridiculous. I agree. When everything goes digital, it will be much easier to build and look up cases. I can also give you everything my family has acquired from the merman over the years. Jacob slid one box towards him and opened it up. That would be lovely. Colin gave a rare smile. Chapter 9, New York. Judge Pamela Dean was called in to aid Judge Amy Gillies in New York, and her husband who ran Black Files there. The agency was dealing with the fallen angels known as Baal and Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth went by many names. Asher, Ashtoreth, Ashtoreth, Ishtar, Astarte, Ashtoreth, Ashtoreth, Astardu, Una Astar, Ashtart, Athart, the Queen of Heaven, Jeremiah 44:25. Baal had multiple names as well, Moloch being one. The two spread throughout the ancient lands gaining worshippers and was now located in New York. Ever since, the fallen ones had been in constant war with the Black Files and judges of the region. Baal had swept through here in the early 40s and had been growing ever since. The certain people brought him to help the Americans out of the Great Depression, allowing the ancient devil to set up shop in New York. Baal, God worshipped in many ancient Middle Eastern communities, especially among the Canaanites, who apparently considered him a fertility deity, and one of the most important gods in the pantheon. As such, Baal designated the universal god of fertility, and in that capacity his title was Prince, Lord of the Earth. Baal is a Canaanite and Phoenician deity, and the son of the chief god El. In artistic depictions and archaeological finds, Baal took the shape of a bull or ram, and had associations with fertility. This god also, apparently according to Canaanite lore, defeated El and had associations with the sun and thunder. And of all the foreign gods the Israelites came into contact with, they appeared to struggle the most with worshipping this one. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He also erected altars to Baal, and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab king of Israel had done. He bowed down to all the starry hosts and worshipped them. 2 Kings 21:3. And one of the most famous instances of Israel going head-to-head with the prophets of Baal comes from 1 Kings 18. In this chapter, the prophet Elijah and the prophets of Baal have a showdown to prove the power of their god and gods. Ashtaroth was a fertility goddess and was worshipped alongside Baal. The fallen angel took on the form of a half-bull half-man. For wealth, as well as fair weather, Baal required his subjects to make blood sacrifices. The highest sacrifices to guarantee the blessing from the fallen angels were child sacrifice. Other forms of worship were required, such as ritual sex, orgies and other perverted acts. There had been increased ceremonies where the fallen ones had their followers impregnate virgins or other women, so the babies could be aborted to feed them and their demon children. Pam was sent to the main clinic to take out the altar there. The prophet and wandering judge Pamela Dean walked through the thick crowd of people at one of the abortion clinics. Protests were going on between two sets of people. One side was for the clinic and the other side against the clinic. Pam was there for other reasons. It was rumored to be run by black witches who used the fetus to sacrifice to Baal, the fallen angel prince of New York, and his wife Ashtaroth. Pam grew tired of the yelling and found a place to stand up in front of the crowd. She wrapped her long black hair into a bun, stepped up onto a car, and yelled, "People! Quiet!" Some looked up at her, and others began to quiet down to listen. Christians, yelling hateful slurs at the others is not helping. We are to be Christ-like, and give advice and truth with love, not hateful remarks. Everyone has a right to free will and their opinions, and yes, it is our duty to spread the truth and the gospel, but doing it out of hate and in anger isn't the right way. We are to be Christ-like, hence the name Christian. She paused. Proverbs 6:16-19. There are 6 things which the Lord hates, 7 which are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and a man who sows discord among brothers. Innocent blood is being shed, and it is not right, but like they have a right to speak, so to you. But I warn thee, repent and turn from thy wicked ways. Live. Acts 2:38. 38. Peter replied, Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. Repent and sin no more, for if you believe in Jesus or not, he is coming back, and the sin will be dealt with, and every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess. Now disperse before I arrest all of you for disorderly conduct. She screamed and a few left, but few remained. Pam's eyes met them that stayed, and she snapped her fingers towards them. If you stay you will protest in an orderly fashion, if not the police will escort you away. She motioned for the police to make a line before hopping down. The judge had sway over the police as well as the Black Files agents. She knew this was a free country, and people had free to believe and say what they wanted, but what was going on was a spiritual battle. This was not a normal clinic, and the ones in the crowd didn't know this. This special mission was for her to conduct, and it could not be done properly with a horde of people yelling and fighting. Pam made her way into the building, and right away she could sense things were off. It was not an ordinary building, and with her blessed sight she could see past the glamour. Demon spirits floated around with glowing eyes, and occult symbols were etched in the walls, warding and bringing in evil. Just as she suspected, a place for Baal worship and sacrifice. Pamela, as well as the other judges in this city, had been at war with Baal's operations for some time, and this was the first she was able to breach, and possibly take down. The Archangel Raphael was on his way to assist her, but the judge was impatient. She knew what needed to be done and wasn't one to wait for long. Pam walked down the main hallway past the busy receptionists and patients. Poor girls did not see what was really going on there. The hidden symbols on the wall, the spirit moving in and out the place, and feel of darkness surrounding the grounds of this place. This was a place for Baal worship to the witches that ran it, but that was unknown to the innocent people who came here. They believed it was just a medical building. Devils are tricky and can deceive even the elect if possible. Pamela needed to find the main altar and tear it down to close the gateway. It would not be easy, especially with the number of spirits and witches in the location. The female judge rounded the corner and came face to face with a few nurses. They knew what she was, and Pam knew their true faces as well. The two sides had a staring contest, sizing each other up. One of the witches ran towards Pamela with a shrug, her face fading between a hag and a young woman, as she flung papers and the other things in her hands. The other witches used their powers to throw medical tools and needles towards the judge. Pam dodged them and picked up a large metal tray to catch the sharp objects. She then swiftly turned to the side as the woman rushed her. Using the pan with the tools sticking out, she bashed the woman in the head. The witch fell to the ground with a thud. Pamela pulled out her silver knives and rushed the other witch who was continuing to throw things at her. A few fluid movements and the other witch were dead. The female judge knew that the whole clinic had to be on alert now, and that left her with a great urgency to complete her task. As the judge ventured down hallway after hallway, she encountered more and more spirits and witches. Between fighting off the many physical witches and praying against the spirits coming towards her, the judge's energy began to dwindle. She needed reinforcements and quickly if she was to survive and take this gateway down. When Pamela rounded the next hallway, a strong spirit phased through a wall and grabbed her around the throat. She gasped and tried to breathe as the black form's hand squeezed. Another witch nurse ran towards her. Pam used her leg to kick her back, but it wasn't hard enough to knock her out. The witch ran towards her again but was smacked in the head with a flying object. The object hit the witch and circled to return to who threw it. Pam glanced toward where the object flew, and the golden glow of an angel lit up the hallway. Raphael stood there holding his boomerang in one hand and sword in the other. He tucked his white wings out of sight and rushed to slash down the demon who was choking Pam. The demon screamed in pain as it evaporated under the sword. Pam was let go, and she placed her back on the wall trying to catch her breath. "Just couldn't wait, huh, mate?" Raphael spoke with a strong Australian accent. His demeanor was light-hearted, and he kept a smile on his face. He put his boomerang away and shook his head. The angel had long, short blonde hair and glowing blue eyes. He looked like one of those typical surfer guys from down under, but he wore heavenly armor. Pamela finally stood up and shot the angel a look. She tried her best to hide her smirk. "You know me, Raphael?" The Israelite judge replied as she walked past the angel. "Not my fault you are too slow," Pamela added as she glanced behind her. "Slow? Slow? Hardly," he protested. Another witch ran out and he punched her back without even looking. He kept his attention on the judge the whole time. The two had worked many missions together before and were close friends. "This must be a very important clinic if they sent you here to help me." Pamela tossed a dagger in the air towards another enemy. "It is, but our mission doesn't stop here." We have orders to go to New Orleans after. Raphael swung his sword and took out a dark mist that was forming. New Orleans. Pam turned her head to face him. She raised a dark brow as she was confused. The judge thought she was to help the New York judges. Something big is cooking up down there, and we are to help Jacob stop it before it is too late. The angel explained as he followed Pam into the middle room. Care to share? She asked. I will once we are done here. One mission at a time, Pammy. He gave her a cheesy smile. Pam rolled her eyes and walked through the door of the room. As she walked towards the altar in the middle of the large room, Pam began praying. The evil and heaviness of the room was almost choking. The angel raised his sword and began to tear down the stone altar before them. Meanwhile, Pam took out a bottle of anointing olive oil and began to smear the symbols on the wall with them. The oil smeared and broke the dark spells written there. More witches and spirits tried to attack, but they were no match for the angel and judge. The evil soon retreated as they knew there were no match for the duo. The portal was closed, and the altar was torn down. Pam took her phone out to document the room and the symbols, as well as the broken altar. She sent the pictures to Amy before turning her attention to the angel. Alright, spill the tea. Pam put her phone away and faced Raphael. This isn't the Boston Tea Party, Sheila. He joked with his Aussie accent. You know what I mean, mate. She glared. Something is brewing down there. That mirror bloke is trying to move in on that territory since Meph is gone. We need to go and stop him. Raphael explains. You mean Samuel? I thought he was restricted to Las Vegas. Pam asked. He is trying to explain his territory. I heard he plans to take the lower half of the states. Since Mammon is gone as well, he started moving in on the Texas territory, and now Louisiana. We need to stop him. He is getting too powerful. The angel explained as they walked out the back door of the clinic. Their work there was done. The black files and other policemen were going to clear and clean the scene. I just need to swing by my hotel room for my things. Pamela explains. Need a lift, mate? Raphael held out his hand with a grin. Pam took his hand and teleported them to her hotel room. They appeared in her room and Pam let go of his hand. She walked towards her suitcase and began packing. Raphael looked around the room before turning on the TV. That will rot your brain. She joked. I agree, but the tunes are interesting. He admitted as he watched Bugs Bunny. Pam looked at him sideways as he sat like a dork on the bed watching cartoons. Who would have thought an archangel watched the Looney Tunes? Pamela folded her clothes and stuffed them into her suitcase. Raphael pulled out a biscuit and started to munch on it as he waited. Chapter 10. Downtown New Orleans. Eva and her father had recently patched things up and settled their issues with each other. Evangeline knew her father was sick and mostly likely didn't have long left to live. His sickness was rare and at first, she couldn't understand how he even became sick. The old merman just shrugged it off as a curse or something. He had lived long enough, and he was too tired to fight it anymore. Henry left most of his businesses to his son, and used the rest of his money and time to open his daughter up her own business. Henry had opened an art gallery in downtown New Orleans for her. The location and their family name were no doubt a good start for her upcoming career. The mermaid had always dreamed of having her own art gallery, and it finally came to pass. Not only was her dream coming true, but her father was finally acting like a father. It was just sad it was almost too late. It took him time to realize how important his daughter was to him. As Eva began to set up her building, one of her first clients walked in. Eva should have been excited, but her smile faded when she saw who it was. The plague doctor vampire Giovanni from her past stood in front of her. There was nothing nostalgic about seeing his face again. Giovanni was a person, or more like a monster from her past she wished to forget. The ruthless vampire had had affection for her, or so he called it, but the mermaid could see past his charm. He indeed was a gentleman around her, and never once harmed her like he did to so many others, but Eva was still afraid. Her time with him was nice, and she had started to fall in love with him, but she was soon hit with the reality of what and who he was. He was arrested by the judges that night many years ago while she fled, and the scenes of that night played over in her mind. Eva tried to harden her heart towards him, but however, things of this matter were not always so easy. Giovanni. She finally spoke, breaking the awkward silence between the two. Yes, Evangeline. He smiled. I thought you were in jail or dead, Eva continued. The judges had locked me up for a while, but I was able to get a decent lawyer. Also, the recent laws and my good behavior helped with my release from jail. I have been out for a few years now. Only recently have I returned here, he explained as he put his hands behind his back and began to look around her gallery. Eva followed him silently. She had so many questions, but she could not form the words. Nice place you have here. I noticed the advertisement and just had to come down and see your work. He smiled warmly towards her. Thank you. I still have tons of work to do, she explained. It seems like you have taken care of yourself. He eyed a couple more paintings as Eva remained silent and followed him. She couldn't bear it any longer. She had to know why he was here. Why are you here? She blurted out. Giovanni turned to face her. I told you. To see you. But why? Eva blurted out. I can't just catch up with an old friend. Giovanni tested the waters. We were never just friends, and nothing is ever that simple with you. Why are you here? She demanded the truth. I miss you. And I also could never forget about that night. The hurt in your eyes. Do you remember the last thing I told you? That you loved me? She replied. And I still do. Eva, I know we left on the worst of terms, and I was not able to explain what I was doing. Butchering people. Not much to explain. Eva crossed her arms. Giovanni cleared his throat in agitation. Eva, I didn't come here to argue. I came here to see you and tell you I am sorry about what happened that night. He spoke softly and with compassion. The vampire still tried his hardest to woo and win her hand. Even till this day he cared for her and wanted her in his life, but each time the mermaid turned his offer down in a calm way. She never wanted to upset him, for she had seen his angry side, and he was one of the few beings she feared. Eva just couldn't deal with Giovanni right now. She had her ill father as well as her new company to run. Eva agrees to let him come visit her gallery if he wishes, but the timing at this moment was not right. He didn't cry. He was thankful for just being able to come back to see her. The vampire kissed her hand and slowly left the building. Across town, Henry Sr. left his daughter to handle setting up her new gallery, as he went to see an old friend. The old merman needed to settle matters before he passed. Henry knew he had gotten in business with the wrong bunch. It was nothing new for the old merman, but this character was different. He seemed more villainous and vindictive when Henry could not supply what he needed. Samuel was his father's enemy, and most likely would come after him, since he would not join the fallen one. The only option Henry had was to make sure his daughter was safe if anything was to ever happen to him. He knew many people that owed him, but only one of them he trusted. That person was Jamal Robichaud. He was once human but was turned into a Rougarou werewolf by a voodoo queen. Jamal was once a police officer, and when he was cursed, he soon afterwards was fired from the New Orleans PD. It didn't keep the large 6'5" all-muscle man, now wolf, down. The 45-year-old started his own security firm for not only supernaturals, but humans alike. He provided not only security systems but bodyguards. Henry was one of his first clients and helped the wolf get a leg up on his business. Today would be the day he cashed in the favor Jamal owed him. Jamal turned from street cop to businessman almost overnight. After being let go from the force due to his behavior, Jamal quickly made use of his new powers, along with his 10+ years as a police officer experience. Not only did he get a handle on his powers, but he learned to focus his gifts for business as well as helping out others. The wolf took another supernatural needing jobs and started a company named PACKS. It stood for Person and Company Kappa Security, a security company that provided bodyguards, security systems and security for any business person or persons. Supernatural or humans were able to purchase their services if they had the money. No matter who the persons or creature, good or evil, Jamal supplies the security, from bodyguards to surveillance technology. Jamal didn't care who they were, everyone deserved to give their families security. As the Creole sat at his large desk, his secretary buzzed in. "Mr. Robichaud, Mr. Legnon is here to see you." The bronze-colored man grinned and told his secretary to let him in. Henry was one of his first clients back when Jamal was first getting started. The Rougarou hadn't seen the merman mob boss in a couple years, so his presence was welcome. Henry casually walked in and stood at the large desk staring at the large man on the other side. Henry tried not to smirk. Jamal couldn't help but smile. It had been ages since he's seen Henry. "Lunch?" Henry offered. "You know I'm always hungry." Jamal chuckled as he walked around his desk to shake Henry's hand. Jamal stood in front of his desk with a pearly white smile. "Well, if you are paying, who am I to turn it down?" He chuckled. Jamal played both sides of the fences. He didn't care who was paying. People or creatures needed security for themselves or their families. If it was homes, businesses, or beings, Jamal supplied it. Henry liked this because he felt the same way. Business was business. As the two sat at lunch, the older Henry proposed a partnership. The merman was heavily into shipping and receiving, and business had been slow lately. "So, I was thinking we could be your service, Jamal. You know I run the Port of New Orleans, and recently opened up to my own delivery system. My son oversees most of it, but we could use your security guards and systems. You would be supporting hometown businesses." Henry chuckled. How could Jamal turn him down? Henry was the first real high-paying client he had. The merman helped the wolf get a lift up in the business. "Of course, Henry, I would be happy to set that up. I will tell my salesmen and purchasers to get with you to set everything up, on or off the books." He smiled as he sipped on his drink. The company had grown from a one-building four-man company to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. All persons, guards and technicians were trained in-house on how to deal with protecting, fighting, humans and supernaturals, and the equipment. Equipment like special cameras to pick up vampires or ghosts, special weapons and also home defense. Anything to do with security, Jamal had it covered. He also had a few of his men protecting the supernatural councils, and they have been doing business with him for over 5 years now, so who was to judge? "Please make sure you do." Henry the merman smiled. The two ordered their food and chit-chatted about the past and various things. "I have one more request, and it is more of a personal one. My daughter Eva." Henry spoke in a low tone. Jamal took a sip of water and listened and waited for him to continue. "If anything was to ever happen to me." Henry paused. "Are you in trouble, Henry?" Jamal asked, sincerely concerned for his friend. "I'm not sure, but if anything happens to me, please look out for Eva." Henry spoke in a serious tone. Jamal understood and gave a nod. "I will protect her as if she was my own family. You have my word, Henry." Jamal held out his hand to shake the older merman's. Henry shook Jamal's hand and forced a smile on his worn and wrinkled face. Henry had aged and looked to be about in his late 50s. His black hair was peppered with gray and white strains, but he was still attractive for an older man, A lot had to do with the supernatural in him. Henry concluded his business lunch with Jamal and made his way back towards his home. He had still more business to deal with and to settle, but the curse of the illness was starting to get to the merman. He was getting weaker each day, and the small amount of movement made him tired. Henry Legnon. A voice whispered from inside of the hallway mirror of the merman's home. Henry turned to face the mirror. Inside stood Samuel holding a glass of whiskey. Henry grumbled to himself and tossed his keys on the table beside the mirror. "What do you want?" He spoke in a gruff tone. Samuel stepped out from the mirror and into the house. The fallen angel looked around the merman's home for a moment before turning to face him. "Did you ever think over my offer?" he asked. "I don't see how the enemy of my father would want to make a deal with me or my businesses." The old merman huffed as he walked to his living room couch and sunk into the cushions. "You know, I could remove that curse. You can continue to live and work alongside your son and daughter. You leave her out of this." He growled and pointed his finger at the fallen angel. Henry then began to cough violently. Samuel did his best to remain calm. He let a chuckle escape his lips as he walked over and sat on the couch's arm. "You see, I could just kill you and your brats. You are the spawn of my enemy, but your business and contacts are useful to me. Not many can claim they own the seas like you. So, you need me. Ha. Go suck an egg. I don't want you or your kind here. I will make sure to tell everyone I know about you. You will never set foot in this city, my father's city," Henry yelled. Samuel quickly grabbed the back of his neck and slammed his head into the coffee table a few times. Blood trickled down from the merman's brow. "I don't need you, just your name. Plus, I already made a deal with your son," Samuel hisses. Henry's eyes went wide with shock. "No?" Henry screams. "Yes. And if your daughter doesn't pledge to me, she will die like you," Samuel yelled before tearing out the merman's throat. Sam left Las Vegas to try and set up shop in New Orleans. He wasn't planning on killing the old merman, but he didn't really need him either. Samuel knew that Mephistopheles' son would never join him, but his grandson was different. The son was more prone to change. Samuel's plan was to cause the humans of the town to bow down and become the slaves to the supernatural. If successful, he would align with the other fallen angels and their territories to spread this worldwide. Samuel appeared in the cabin of Henry Jr. He adjusted his suit cuffs as he walked towards his desk. "Samuel." Henry rose a brow as he leaned back in his chair. "It is done." The fallen one smirked. Henry Jr. had no idea what he was talking about. "Your father, he is dead." Samuel spoke coldly and studied the younger merman for a reaction. Henry Jr. just sighed deeply. He knew it was only a matter of time. A part of him was saddened, but mostly he was just relieved. Now he could run the business like he wanted to. His heart was almost as cold as the sea. He was not as compassionate as his sister. He was a chip off the old block, and like his father, business came first. "What of my sister?" he asked. "Still haven't had a family reunion yet. How old are you two? And never even met her?" Samuel asked, a bit surprised. The old man let her run off and do as she pleased. Henry was a bit annoyed at the subject. Samuel picked up on it and changed the subject. "And what about our plan?" Samuel asked. "I was able to find Giovanni. He recently acquired pharmaceutical companies, so Giovanni can without a doubt make a virus and a semi-cure like you requested." "Good. Now you know I will have to speak and try and convince your sister to join us, or at least deal with her mother. Claire? That whore. I can kill her for free if you want." Henry Jr. chuckled. "Maybe. But I would like to see if your sister will join us and be loyal. Let me handle that. You just make sure Giovanni makes that virus." Samuel turns and teleports out the room. Who better to kill Claire than her own daughter Eva? Samuel was a sucker for the dramatic. Chapter 11. Evangeline sat on the porch of her home staring at a blank canvas. Her home was along the bayou off the main road back in the deep woods. Not many people lived out there, so it was very secluded and quiet. Her father, Henry, didn't like her to be around humans. He feared humans' actions towards them if they knew their secret. Humans tended to fear what they didn't know, and that fear brought the worst out of them. Henry also didn't associate with their own kind. The merfolk disowned him when he fell in love with Eva's mother, and for 200 years, he hasn't spoken to them. Or that was what he told her. Henry also didn't like talking to Eva about them. He tried to keep her away from the sea as much as possible. Eva was lonely, but she was used to it. After 100 years of solitude, it became a part of her. At times she did want a friend to talk to, but she knew it was for the best. Eva's father lived in town and would often send his maid Valkyrie to check on Eva. The maid was one of the few trusted humans that knew their secret. Even though the two had made up, Henry was not used to being around his daughter. It was almost awkward for him. Eva thought nothing when she saw her drive up. She sat her paintbrush down and grabbed a rag to wipe her paint-stained hands. Eva walked to the edge of the porch and leaned on the wooden beam. "So, what does Daddy have you doing today, Val?" she asked, crossing her arms. The maid wobbled quickly over to her. Eva noticed Val's eyes were bloodshot and her face full of grief. Eva uncrossed her arms and walked down the steps to meet her. "What's wrong?" she asked. The maid hushed her. "Let's go inside and I'll explain." Val tugged on her arm. "No, Valerie, tell me now," she demanded. The maid lowered her head. Val didn't want to break the news to her like this. "Dang it, Val, tell me." She stomped her foot in anger. "Your father," Val finally spat out. "My father what?" Eva asked. Val kept quiet. "My father what?" Eva screamed, but she knew it was bad. "Honey child, he is gone." She looked up at Eva, and a tear ran down her cheek. "Gone? What do you mean gone? Like back to France or? Eva didn't want to accept the truth. "No, Shaw, he is gone to the Great Spirits," Val said. Eva blinked a couple times in shock. She had just spoken to her father the other day. They had only reconciled to get along and have a decent relationship. Eva shook her head. "No, no, you lie. He cannot be." She covered her mouth, catching her breath. A huge lump formed in her throat. The look in Val's face told the whole thing was true. Eva's face tore into tears. She took off running into the woods. "Evangeline!" Valerie yelled, but Eva ignored her. She kicked off her boots and threw off her dress she was wearing. She then jumped into the cold brown bayou. Her legs turned into a gray-colored tail as soon as they were wet. That water was her comfort, her escape. Val knew exactly where she was going. She walked into Eva's house and grabbed a towel and some clothes, and then walked to the dock. She slowly got inside the little motorboat and took off. Eva swam screaming under the water. Air bubbles escaped and floated to the top when she reached the bottom and could go no farther, Eva surfaced still screaming. She punched and slapped at the water. Why? Why?" she cried out. The worn-out Eva wiped the hair from her face. The burning in her eyes and throat throbbed, but it was nothing compared to the pain she felt in her heart. She slowly paddled her way to the bank of the bayou. She crawled on the bank and laid there face down. The bottom of her tail was still in the water, slapping it. Eva buried her face in her arms and cried. The human emotions tore at her, and the pain overcame her body. Eva buried her face in her arms as tears flowed for her father. Between sobs, Eva began to sing an old French lullaby. Her father would sing it to her when she was scared as a little girl. In some ways it gave her comfort. She slowly turned over onto her back, staring up at the sky. The tears slowly rolled down her face to the ground as the lyrics poured out. Eva could hear her father's voice singing it to her, his voice echoing in her head. Val rounded the corner and saw Eva on the bank. She pulled up alongside her. Eva honey, we need to fulfill your father's wishes. His body was to be returned to your people. Eva sat up. My people disowned him, just like my mother did. They are not my people, she said angrily. I know Eva, but it's what he wanted, and we have to respect that. Now come on, I need you. You are the only one who can talk to them. Val held her hand out. Valerie helped her in the boat and wrapped a towel around her. She then started the boat up and took off back to the house. On the ride back, Eva dried herself off. She was so lost. Her father, her only family, was gone. Now she was truly alone. The next few days were the hardest. Val was instructed to give Eva Henry's journal a last hope. It contained information on their kind and also things she needed to know, things he had no heart to tell her when he was alive. Eva read through a little of it to learn what to do for his funeral, his last wishes and all. The funeral was rather long and uncomfortable for her. Not knowing any of these people and having to force a fake smile on her face. She knew her father wanted her to be strong, and that's what Eva did. That afternoon, after the last person left the funeral, they packed up his coffin inside the hearse. Eva didn't even wait for the driver to open the door. She opened it herself and slid inside. She didn't like people waiting on her hand and foot. Over the years, having that type of service got tiring. Eva read that she had a brother, and he was to take over the business, but he did not show up to the funeral. No matter, sooner or later she would run into him, no doubt. When the body was properly loaded and secured, the driver put the car in drive and headed out. They then made the long trip down to the Gulf of Mexico. The whole time Eva sat quietly looking out the window. She really didn't know what to expect. She only knew what her father had written down. The drive took a couple hours, so it gave her time to read over the ritual. The sun began to set when they arrived at the beach. A couple of his men brought his wrapped body out to the sea. They slowly sat it down on the beach, and Eva nodded for them to leave. Eva's long flowing gown and brown hair floated in the wind, then settled in the water as she stepped into the sea. She began to sing a call out for the merpeople. The sadness in her voice carried over the waves out to sea. The morning song of her people was a beckoning call for them. She sang well into the evening. The moon rose high over the ocean, lighting up the sky. Eva stopped singing when she saw movement in the distance. She took a deep breath, holding it for a moment before relieving it. Even though the journal explained everything, she still was nervous. The mermaids and mermen surfaced the water slowly. They watched her for a moment before swimming towards her. They stopped and watched her again, studying her. The leader of them swam over to her. I heard of his passing. I am truly sorry. She bowed her head. Eva could tell she was very old. Her skin was pale and gray as the deep sea. Two other mermaids swam up and gripped her father's body. Thank you. I know he wanted to be buried with his ancestors, Eva told the leader. The leader nodded and went to swim off. She stopped and turned her head. If you wish, you may join us. She offered Eva a chance to live with them. Eva thought about it for a moment, but then shook her head. No thank you, I will be fine. The leader nodded, and in a blink of an eye they were gone. Back at home, Eva sat on the railing of her porch looking up at the moon. Her pain was still aching in her heart, so she began to sing. The only way she knew how to express such pain and emotion beside painting. A few days later, Eva walked in the gallery with a couple paintings under her arms. Her long brown hair pulled up into a messy bun. She wore black slacks and a green blouse. Her long, handmade earrings hung and jiggled, as did her shiny shell necklace. As Eva entered the gallery entrance, she pushed the door close with her foot and sat the paintings down. She then proceeded to walk towards the office, unlocked it, and walked in. She sat down on her purse on the desk and then turned on the computer. She waited till the screen came on before walking back out. Eva knew she needed to hire help, but right now she had enough dealing with getting her deadlines met. Paintings shipped out, others ordered, and no to mention a full showcase with local artists. Eva walked back to the front desk and grabbed the paintings. She then walked to the back and placed them on the back table. They needed to be framed and hung up for display in the gallery. The phone rang and she jogged back towards the front, her heels clanking on the wood floor as she rushed to answer it. She reached it, picking it up. "Hello?" But whoever it was had already hung up. Dang it. She cursed, hanging up the phone. She ran her fingers through her long brown hair out of frustration and looked around. "I promised Dad, I won't fail you," she said, walking back to her office. She needed to answer emails, confirm orders, and also try to find a couple of people to hire. She sighed and began her long day. As Eva sat at her computer typing, she thought back on when she was a child. Her father would often bring her to work, and he would sit in the very chair she was in. Eva would sit on the ground beside him, always drawing or coloring to keep herself occupied. It was always Eva's passion and the whole reason for the gallery. Henry knew one day his time would come, a day he would have to leave his daughter, and he wanted to leave something worth giving her. Eva broke out of her daydream and cracked her neck. Her hands rubbed the back of her shoulder blade. She could feel a hard knot that had formed from this stress. She rubbed it to try and make the pain go away, but it was stubborn. She rose from the desk and walked out of the office into the gallery. She gathered her purse and decided to close down the shop for the rest of the day. Eva hopped into her car and drove off to her home. The mermaid was so stressed she didn't even notice the gangling creature watching her leave the parking lot. Evangeline sat on the living room floor of her room. All kinds of samples scattered all around her. Paint samples, carpet samples, even curtain samples. A very wealthy vampire client wanted his home remodeled. She had spent the last couple of days collecting ideas and measurements from the vamp's home, while trying to handle the business for the gallery. She ran her fingers through her hair and gripped it tightly. Eva needed a break. She couldn't think clearly at the moment, so she rose from the floor and walked outside towards her dock. Evangeline's home sat close to the bayou. A stone path led a couple feet down towards the dock, which stretched over the water. She always felt safer being closer to the water. It was in her nature after all. The stones felt cool to her bare feet as she walked down the path. A couple more steps and she reached the wooden dock. She slowly walked to the end of the dock and got down on her hands and knees, then on her belly. Evangeline laid on her belly, dipping her hand in the water. The cool wood of the dock felt good on her skin. She hummed to herself as she swished the water underneath her fingertips. The moon rose high in the sky, lighting up the water's surface. The water was so warm and inviting. She couldn't take it anymore. The urge to go for a swim was too strong, so she had to jump in. She quickly removed her shirt and pajama bottoms. Looking back towards her home before heading into the water, Eva knew she couldn't stay long, just a short swim. Tomorrow was a big day and she needed to get the samples approved, then head down to the Golden Seahorse, her art gallery, to pick out the art to go along with the samples. Eva then dived into the water. Her silky legs turned into a gray-color scaly tail. She flapped it with power, diving down and then back to the surface. Eva surfaced just enough for her eyes to peek out above the water. Her long brown hair floated up and surrounded her. The bayou was calm, and the night sky clear, allowing her to see downstream. Eva slowly moved her tail, propelling her down the bayou, still keeping a lookout for anything. As Eva swam further out, she raised herself more out of the water. The crickets sang their love songs as she paddled along. She began to hum and sing along with them, losing herself in song and swim. The yellow eyes of the gators showed in the distance as Eva swam farther out into the swamps. They were no threat to her, the gators, they normally kept to themselves. Humans were the real threat. Suddenly she heard the sounds of a motorboat. Eva's head whipped around looking for where the sound was coming from, but couldn't figure it out, so she quickly dived down and swam towards a cypress tree. The swamp was littered with them and they made the perfect cover. Meanwhile, the creature made its way down to Eva's yard and jumped into the trees hiding. It had watched her swim off and was waiting for her return. Its elongated claws gripped the tree trunk as its horns, like deer horns almost, entangled in the branches. The creature had to be about 7 feet tall, and its black whole body blended in with the darkness of the night. Resurfacing and peeking around the tree, Eva watched the boat speed by. It was a couple of drunk humans laughing and carrying on. Eva could smell the liquor from where she was. She shook her head as they passed. A frog croaked by her ear. "I understand, friend, I understand," she said, swimming off in the other direction. She wanted to be as far away from those humans as possible. Eva decided to head back to her home. As she turned, she noticed a twinkling in the moonlight. It caught her eye. She quickly backstroked towards the twinkle. It was always a thrill for her to find hidden treasures. Eva quickly swam to the bank before she lost sight of it. At first the mermaid didn't know if she was seeing things or what it was until it caught the light again. She rested her elbow on the bank and used her other hand to push back the grass. Eva noticed the chain and began to dig it out of the mud. Her heart raced as she dug at the ground. Eva finally got it uncovered completely and ran her thumb over it to wipe the excess mud off. The mermaid dipped it in the water and rubbed the remaining mud off of it. Her thumb rubbed it clean to reveal a beautiful antique gold necklace. Aquamarine jewels sat inside of it, gleaming under the water from the moon's light. Eva gasped in awe at its beauty. She quickly put it around her neck. Her fingers ran along the chain, then rested on top of the center. Eva looked down as it sat on her pale skin. She wondered how it ended up on the banks of the bayou in the middle of nowhere. Who could have owned this? And why did they drop it or disregard it? She shrugged her shoulders and swam off back towards her dock. She hopped out the water and sat on the edge of her dock. Eva gripped her hair and wrung it out as much as she could as she shifted her tail to 2 human legs. Eva hummed to herself as she reached for her pajamas to help the drying along. She hopped up from the dock and ran back towards her home, happy at her new treasure. The creature eyed Eva and waited till she reached her home before hopping down out of the trees. Silently it followed Eva's foot tracks back to her house. It stopped when it reached her screen door and peeked inside to watch her. Eva placed the necklace around her neck and then put her long shirt on. She tossed her wet pants in the hamper and walked to the kitchen sink. Suddenly the ugly creature barged in and tackled her. Eva fell hard on the floor with a gasp as the wind was knocked out of her. The creature smelled her as it raised its claws. Before it could strike, a huge rougarou tackled the thing. The 2 massive creatures tore apart her house as they fought tooth and nail. Growling and screech filled the house as Eva watched in terror. The fight soon went outside as the huge wolfman tackled the creature again, and they both fell in the swamp. The current takes the horned one, while the wolf slowly made his way to the bank and shook himself. Eva made her way outside and watched the whole scene. The wolf slowly shifted back to his human form. Still large, a bronze-colored male sat on the bank. His side was bleeding as he was out of breath. "Who are you and what was that?" Eva walked toward the man. "My name Jamal Rabicho. Your father has set up security for you. I own a security firm and owe your dad one, so I promised him I would look after you. I was on my way to introduce myself when I saw that thing," he explained. Eva walked towards the man and bent down. She used the water to heal him as they continued to discuss the recent event. The Wendigo creature burst through the door to a mansion and collapsed on the floor. He suddenly turned back painfully into a well-built male. His hair was as black as the skin on the creature that he transformed from. The ribs were now muscle and smooth flesh, and the face now a handsome man with piercing blue eyes. He stood up and went to the mirror to check the mark the wolf left on his face. It slowly healed and he growled. His anger grew at the thought of his meal getting away, and he punched the mirror. Silver glass fell to the ground and shattered into pieces, as the thing let out a loud inhuman scream. Chapter 12. Jacob sat in his motorbike taking pictures of the docks and the Legnon's operations. The judge noticed a few things had changed. Security for sure had been ramped up. The judge used his phone too and zoomed in on the large pirate ship that was docked. This no doubt was where they lived. While watching, he noticed a figure emerging from the ship's deck and making his way down the ramp. He wore a peculiar bird mask with a long black jacket. He had never seen this before and decided to follow him. Jacob started his bike and kept his distance as he followed the male's car. A good 30-minute drive and the car stopped downtown. The male exited and made his way into an art gallery. Strange, Jacob thought to himself as he took more photos and observed. Since when are pirates into art? Or is this a personal thing for this birdman? Jacob texted some of the pictures to Colin, hoping to get a response, but there was none. He would no doubt have to find out for himself. Jacob sighed as he parked his bike and made his way towards the gallery. He snapped some more photos before leaning his back against the front wall of the building and waited. The man in black exited the building 40 minutes later and paused just outside the door. He didn't turn to face Jacob, but he knew he was there. "Can I help you?" His icy Italian accent spoke from under the mask. "I hope so. I have never seen you around here before." Jacob was straightforward. He pushed himself off the wall and faced the man. The male finally faced Jacob. The mask was a bit awkward and could be frightening looking to some. "I have business here. It didn't take you guys long to find me, huh, Judge? May I ask your name?" He spoke politely. "Judge Davison, and you are?" "Dr. Giovanni Venture." "What do you want, Judge?" "I assure you I am not breaking probation." Giovanni spoke harshly. "What are your dealings with the criminal Henry Legnon and his son Henry Legnon Jr.? Jacob asked. "Well, Legnon Sr. is dead, so I can't really deal with a dead man." Jacob blinked a few times. The news was a shock to the judge. "I am guessing you did not know this from the look on your face. Tell me, why are you still a judge? No one in your family is making you, yet you stay. Is it the family honor thing?" He was serious about the judge. "It is family honor, yes, but also my oath and duty to serve my God." "God? PFT. There is no God." "I am afraid you are mistaken, Mr. Venture. You live with your science and your logic, but even the smartest are fools who deny there being a God. There is certainly a God, and he is none too happy. Why do you think he brought us judges back after almost 3,000 years? He brought us back to deal with the fallen ones and creatures that were reading their faces to destroy and enslave humanity. Humans are made in the image of God. If your master, the head boss Lucy, can make them fall and perish, well, it is like he is slapping God, right? You deny God, but you have powers. Where did those come from? If there is a darkness, there is a light, Giovanni, and well, call us warriors for that light." Jacob was bold and stood his ground. The vampire just listens to him speak. He assumed he could roll over the young one, but this judge had knowledge and faith. Two things that were a dangerous combination to him. Giovanni knew there was no arguing with such a man. "You have a good day, Judge. I am sure I will see you again." He tipped his hat before making his way towards his car. Meanwhile, across town, Colin and Kitty sat outside of the large Witch Coven home. While Jacob did his stakeout on the docks, the Lion thought that it would be a good idea to continue the case here. He was reluctant to bring her, but he knew he had to watch her. Either he brought her, or she would go rogue and come anyways. At least this way he could watch her so she wouldn't do anything stupid. Kitty was starting to lose it. She was so wrapped up in tracking and killing this Wendigo, nothing mattered anymore. Instead of facing her problems and mourning Fred, she was in a thrust for blood. Colin felt awful and did his best to help her. He knew she was the youngest sibling in her family, and her mother was indifferent and abandoned her. Her dad was a major jerk and used her as a weapon. Kitty's siblings basically tried to raise her until they took Charlie away and Ryan into a mission. When she did leave, Bob, a werewolf, was her sensei. On top of all the Eric drama being her first love ever and also her reason to have trust issues in relationships. Freddie was the first man that was kind with her. She lowered her guard and let him in and bam, she lost him. She was full of rage, anger and wanted revenge. Colin got that, and he was a little soft on her. He didn't quite know why, but he was. Although she acted tough, deep inside Kitty was afraid and hated feeling like that. To cover her feelings, and so she doesn't look weak, the cat trains every single day. As the lion and the cat stood across the street as they watched the house closely. Shadows danced inside, but there was no sign of the Wendigo or Claire. Suddenly a door was opened, and a glimpse of horns set the cat off. It was all she needed to see. The tiny ninja ran towards the large 3-story house, as Colin tried to stop her. He cursed and tried to grab her, but she was too fast. She sprinted and practically climbed up the outer wall. She slipped into the top window and Colin tried not to panic. He made his way to the front door. Just as he was about to knock, the door swung open. "Judge, we were expecting you," the large Amazon-looking witch yelled. She pulled him inside and a fight ensued. Colin didn't like hitting women, but it was more or less in self-defense. Also, it was either him or her, and the judge was not going to stand for this witch taking him out. The judge and the witch hit each other with punches and blocks. Both were equally trained. Meanwhile, Kitty made her way down the 3rd floor to the 2nd. Most of the top floor was empty, except for a few sleeping witches. No Wendigo and no Claire. Colin had warned her not to kill anyone, but if they got in her way she would. A woman and a male were coming up the stairs, and Kitty tried to duck out of sight, but it was too late. The woman tossed a fireball at her, and Kitty rolled on the ground. She removed her knife and proceeded to fight the advancing male. She was able to stab him a few times, but the male had got a few punches in. Kitty's nose trickled with blood as she Sparta kicked him off the top of the stairs. He landed in between Colin and the Amazon woman. "Catherine," he yelled as he glanced upwards. It was a mistake as the woman cold-cocked the lion. His face went to the side and he almost fell over. He caught himself and turned back to face the woman with glowing golden eyes. He fought the urge to shift into a lion and eat her as he socked her back in the face. The woman stumbled and fell into another witch that came around the corner. The witch held her sister up, and the two proceeded to attack Colin. Colin jumped over the couch in the living room to avoid an energy ball coming from him. He picked up a vase and threw it at the larger woman. It broke apart on her face and she stumbled a bit. The smaller witch screams and rushes the judge. Colin clotheslined her hard, knocking her out cold. The large witch ran towards him, and Colin leaped onto the couch and brought his fist down on top of her with all his might. The two fell on the ground, and the woman was dazed. He used his elbow to slam into her face, finally knocking her out. Colin rolled over and slowly stood up. "I am getting too old for this." As he groans and runs towards the stairs, he loosened his red tie. While Colin made his way up one flight of stairs, Kitty fought with the fire witch. The two exchanged blows as Kitty did her best to make her way down the stairs. She kicked the woman in the stomach and uppercut her. The woman fell back on the ground in pain. Kitty made her way down but was hit with a chair. She fell over the railing, but Colin reached out from the second floor and caught her ankle. He held on to her as a witch ran towards him. Colin blocked the woman's punches with one hand as he tried to swing Kitty up. Finally, Kitty was able to retrieve a blade, and she tossed it at the woman. It went between her eyes and she fell dead. "Catherine!" The lion yells as he finally swung her with enough momentum for her to grab on the stair railing beside her. She clung to it, and Colin let go as another witch ran towards him. Kitty climbed up and over onto the stairs. She went to run up the few steps to help Colin, but a few witches were advancing from below on the first flight of stairs. Kitty used the railing and pushed herself up to kick the first one in the mouth. She then pushed off the wall to flip behind the second one that advanced. Colin grew tired of blocking the witch's punches. He bent down and used his momentum to flip her up and over behind him. She fell over the stairs railing onto the floor below. Colin then ran down the stairs to help Kitty. Kitty would duck for Colin so he would punch a witch, and he would weave so she could do the same to the ones coming behind him. The two worked in sync as they made their way down the stairs slowly. The witches manifested like roaches, but the two worked so well together, they were able to hold them off. Colin bent down at the bottom of the second flight of stairs, and Kitty jumped off his back onto the witches behind him. A few kicks and punches and she knocked them out with ease. Colin tackled the few in front and they fell over the banister. Colin noticed the large window at the end of the hall on the first floor. It was their only way out. The second floor was filling up with witches, and some were clawing down the walls. Colin grabbed Kitty and he dragged her down the hallway. The two hauled butts down the hallway towards the window at the end. A large but slow troll-looking creature stepped out in front of them trying to block their escape. Kitty dropped down, slid under it, and then leaped on its back stabbing it like a wild woman. Colin gut punched it a couple times before moving aside as a flame came flying past him. The flame from the witch hit the troll, and Kitty back flipped off the thing. Colin and Kitty ran towards the window, but Kitty turned back to face the advancing witches. There were too many running and crawling after them. Colin grabbed her by the waist and tucked her under his arm, as he used the other to break the window. He then leaped out and towards the ground. Kitty and Colin rolled onto the ground as glass fell like rain around them. The witches went to follow them, but Colin and Kitty were out in the open. Colin had enough and he stood up to let out a lion roar. The witches flinched and retreated back into their home. Kitty went to run back in, but Colin grabbed her arm and spun her around to face him. "No." He bared his lion teeth and growled. He was bloody and bruised and so was Kitty, however the ninja didn't care. "They are not in there," he yelled. Kitty snatched her arm out of his grip and walked past him towards the road. Colin blew a clot of blood out his nose onto the ground and followed her. Back at the Black Files building, Colin is holding an ice pack to his face, while the bruised and bloody Kitty pouts on the corner. "What happened to you two?" Pam asked as she strolled into the conference room. The Israel judges looked them over with concern. Ralph followed Pamela in, and he couldn't help but chuckle when he noticed the two. "Cricky, you two had a bloody brawl." Colin flipped off Raphael. The angel just laughed it off as he walked toward the bloody lion. "You want me to help you with that? Or do you want the bruises as a fashion statement, mate? Badge of honor maybe?" he asked, keeping a smile on his face. Colin let the ice pack down as the angel hovered his hand over his face. He slowly began to heal Colin's face. "Do I even want to know?" Pam asked. "It was a coven." Spat out. Once Colin was healed, Ralph went to heal Kitty, but she hisses and runs out the room. "Leave her." Colin huffed toward Pam who was going to follow after Kitty. "Why are you two here anyways?" he grumbled. "Nice to see you too, Jameson." Pam rolled her eyes. "We came to help out with Samuel." Raphael blurted out. "Samuel?" Colin sat up straight. We are working on taking down Henry Jr. and Claire, Mef's mistress. There is no Samuel, Colin said. None that you have seen. I have heard word of him and his armies pushing this way. He is the reason for all this madness and chaos. I heard words from other angels that Henry Jr. is working for Samuel now, Raphael explained. Colin stood up, wiped a hand over his 5 o'clock shadow and cursed. He paced around in the conference room before turning to the others. It does make sense now. He always hated Mef. Now that Mef is gone, he is trying to take the city for himself. Strange how Henry Jr. just betrayed his father. His father is dead. Rumor has it the judges killed him, but in truth it was Samuel, Raphael explained. Seriously? Why am I in the dark about everything? Colin yells. Just then Jacob walked in the room and looked around at everyone. Did you know this? Colin asked Jacob. Jacob raised his hands in defense. Know what? Ralph sits down and swings back and forth in the chair like a dork, as he explains everything to Jacob. Chapter 13. Eva sat in her office at the Golden Seahorse. She had finally got a break from the gallery's duties, and needed to go through some emails. The past few weeks were hectic with her father passing, Giovanni back in town, and the whole creature disaster and such. The mermaid needed to break away from the stress at home and her personal life, and focus on her gallery. It was where her true passion laid. As she scrolled through the emails, she noticed one from Valeria. Valeria, or Mimi as Eva called her, was her father's maid for the longest. Eva was kinda scared to open it. Ever since that day Val told her of her father's passing, she was afraid of more bad news. Eva's mind backtracked to that frightful day a moment, but soon pushed past her fear. Eva clicked open the email and read over it. Mimi was finally settling down and getting married. The fee needed Eva's address to send her an invitation. Finally, some good news. Eva smiled and emailed her back the information. The fee was far older than Eva, but she was immortal just like the merfolk. For her race she was quite young still. Eva went to open another email when the door to the gallery opened slowly. She glanced up to see a male with dark brown hair walk in. He was wearing a fancy suit and a wicked smile on his face, but what caught her was his blue eyes. They were as blue and inviting as the ocean, and the mermaid flesh pricked with goosebumps. Eva shook the feeling off, then rose from behind the desk wearing a smile on her face. Welcome, can I help you with anything? She asked, walking over towards him. The man looked around the room before his eyes settled on her. Good morning, madam. I was wondering about your gallery. I am redoing my office and would like to hang a couple paintings. He gave her a warm, sweet smile. She held out her hand to shake his. I'm Eva, I own the gallery. I'm sure I can help you. He shook her hand. Jack, my dear, please call me Jack. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. For a moment she could have sworn he smelled her hand. Eva pushed the thought aside, but then the scent of male hit her. It was faint, but it smelled just like the creature that attacked her. She looked deep in his eyes again, feeling the pull. For a split second the light hit them at an angle, and those eyes turned a hollow black, just like those eyes of the creature, ancient and full of evil. Eva remained calm and did not let this Jack know she knew what he was. Glad to meet you, Eva. His slick northern accent cutting through the silence. She let his hand go and began to show him around. The mermaid was not going to cause a scene. She wanted to know more about this Jack. The man pointed out a few paintings and paid for them with cash. He then insisted on Eva delivering them herself. Against better judgment, Eva agreed. The mermaid should have let Jamal or Giovanni know what was going on, but the independent mermaid was stubborn. The next afternoon, Eva drove out towards the address Jack had given her. It was an old plantation-style home that had just been redone to modernize it. She noticed the dark-haired, suit-wearing Jack on the porch waiting. He walked to the edge of the porch and grinned. He looked like a tiger waiting for his prey, and Eva knew this was like walking into a trap, but she wanted to know what he was, and why he was after her. Eva got out of her car and grabbed the paintings. "Evening, Mr. Jack," she put on a smile and walked up a few steps. He still didn't move, but he didn't intimidate her. It was as if a shark was sizing up a dolphin. Each equal in their own ways, but the other having respect and not eating the other to learn more. "Evening, Ms. Legnon, please come inside. Let me help you." He finally offered help and took a few of the pictures. He then turned and walked inside. Eva shook her head and followed him inside. It was a huge mistake, but her curiosity took over her common sense. The place was lit with candles and decorated with the fall colors to match the autumn season. "Well, I must say, I think you did a marvelous job." Eva admired his work on updating the home. "Thank you. This place belonged to an old friend and left it to me when he passed. I had a lot of work done on the place to modernize it," he explained as he led her around. He placed the paintings he was carrying in the hallway, and walked back to retrieve the one Eva was carrying. She handed him the painting and followed him slowly. The mermaid paused when she noticed a dinner table fixed with candles and food. "I do hope you can stay for dinner. It is the least I can do for your help." Eva was hesitant at first, but then decided to not be rude. Plus, if it allowed her to learn more about this Jack, then she would stay. Jack led her into the dining room and removed the chair out from the table. Eva sat down and Jack pushed the chair in slowly, his eyes flashing a black color as he took a sniff of her hair. Eva sat her handbag on her lap. Inside was a small gun with special bullets she acquired from a voodoo friend of hers. She didn't go into trouble without being prepared. Jack walked around and took his seat at the other end of the small table. "Thank you for meeting me once more, Miss Eva. I appreciate the good company." He smiled over at her as his butler came in with the drinks. "Oh, my pleasure, Mr. Jack. It is always a good thing to get to know my clients." She could smell something in the kitchen cooking, but Eva had to keep reminding herself to keep her guard up. She thanked the butler when he poured her some wine. Jack raised his glass to her, and she followed his lead. He then brought the glass to his lips and drank. Eva took a small sip and sat her glass down. Jack knew it couldn't be this easy. She had to know something, but what did she know was the question. "So, Eva, may I inquire about you?" he asked, looking over to her. "What do you mean?" Eva asked, wanting him to clarify the question. "Oh, you and I both know we are not what we appeared to be." A small grin spread across his face. A lump of fear formed in Eva's throat, but she kept her cool. "Oh, and please explain why so." She placed her hand under her chin a bit to let him know she was listening. Jack took another sip of his wine. "Why don't you go first, my dear? Tell me your fishy story. I would love to know how you came upon owning such a wonderful gallery. At the same time, please inform me on how you are able to be in public and still hiding who, or shall I say what you are, Little Mermaid." Eva's eyes widened a bit. Jack's smile stayed glued to his face as he watched her. The gig was up. He knew she was onto him. "I will make you a deal. I will tell you my story, if you tell me yours." Eva sat straight up in her chair and placed her hands in her lap on top of her purse. Jack nodded. "Very well. I promise to tell you my story after I have heard your madam." He raised his glass a bit, egging her on to start her story. Eva explained what she was and who her father was. She also told him how she acquired the gallery. The mermaid only gave him some basic information on her life. Jack sat listening to her every word. Eva looked over at Jack. "Now that I have shared a bit about me, it is your turn." She lifted her own glass and drank. He finally broke his silence. Jack let out a chuckle that almost mimicked the crackling fire behind him. "My story." His eyes drifted away from her a bit. Jack's eyes flashed black as he stared over at Eva. Eva sat still and didn't show 1 ounce of fear. My real name is Sunakakao. I belong to the Ojibwa people. The Ojibwa, also Ojibwe or Chippewa, are a large group of Native Americans and First Nations in North America. My mother was of Chippewa and my father was a white man, and whom I grew up to favor in looks and personality. The tribe thought I would become like my father and wanted to banish me, but my mother, who was also the daughter of the chef, convinced them otherwise. I grew up among the tribe and was due to become next chief by birthright. Our tribe was to join another and bring peace to our land. I was to wed the daughter to the chief of the other tribe. I fell deeply in love with that woman, the very woman who would betray me. His voice grew cold as he hissed a bit. Eva sat still and dared not move. We were set to wed and bring the tribes together, but she didn't love me, she loved, but yet another. In my rage I cut out her heart and ate it. I then slaughtered her whole tribe and even half of my own. I even killed my mother when she told me I was like my father. I ate all of their flesh. Some raw, others cooked. This power and the taste I received from eating her heart and their bodies only grew deeper. I began luring and eating others throughout the wilderness until my tribe was almost extinct. Soon the land was overtaken with settlers. Through the centuries I only became smarter and stronger. Once America became civilized, I adapted to the white man's ways, often posing as a businessman or other much-needed help. The only thing my father did right was give me his face, that of a white man. He let out a chuckle. Wendigo is what my people called me. Eva had heard the term once before. A Wendigo is a demonic spirit believed by Algonquin-based Native American tribes to possess humans and turn them into cannibals. The term Wendigo or Wendigo is used to describe both the evil spirit as well as the creature that humans can become when possessed by the spirit. The monster version of the mythical creature is human-like, but very tall and gaunt, with deeply sunken eyes and yellowish, decaying skin. They are impossibly thin and have an unending hunger that craves only human flesh. The best-known way to become a Wendigo is through cannibalism. By eating another human being, even out of necessity for survival, a human can be overcome by these spirits and be transformed into one. The fear of turning into this creature was so strong that it was preferable to kill oneself, rather than resort to cannibalism. The Wendigo legend was prevalent in the northern United States and Canada, and particularly roamed around woods and forests in the coldest areas where food was scarce and survival was challenging. The mermaid knew she could not stay a moment longer. This creature was dangerous. Eva jolted and went to run out the door, but Jack was faster. He ran and caught her by the throat and pulled her close. The Wendigo then leaned closer as to hiss in her ear. "Leaving so soon? We haven't even had dinner yet." His fingers grew to long black claws and twisted around her neck as well as arm. He forced her around and back into her seat. "Run again and I will chop that tail off." His claw scraped her cheek, drawing blood. He then brought it to his mouth and tasted it. "I do enjoy seafood." He let another chuckle out as he held on to her. "You had plenty of chances to stay clear of me, but you decided to come to my home. I was there that night at your home. By the way, where is that mail that chased me off for that doctor of yours that loves to visit your gallery?" he asked. Eva shook in anger and fear as she was trapped in his grip. "They will come looking for me." Eva spoke through grit teeth. "Oh, I am sure." Jack then knocked the mermaid out. Her body went limp in his arms. He picked her up and slung her over his shoulders as he made his way outside. Jack carried the knocked-out mermaid over his shoulders and up the small ladder. With ease, Jack lifted Eva up and tossed her into the large tank. The water splashed out a bit as the Eva slowly sank to the bottom. The sudden chill of the water woke her up, and she swam to the top, legs now instinctively thin under her. "What the heck are you doing, Jack?" she screamed as she tried to swim to the side. Jack quickly closed the cage-like top so she could not escape. Eva grabbed the cage and shook it. "Let me out!" Eva screamed as Jack turned to walk back down the ladder. Jack simply let out a chuckle as he made his way to the door. He turned to face her before closing and locking the door behind him. Eva's screams and ranting could be heard as Jack walked away from the large shed behind his plantation home. No one would ever notice those screams when they were out into the deep country. Eva screamed until it hurt and crackled in her throat. She then slowly sank to the bottom of the large tank and sulked. Eva was weak and her spirit low as she sat at the bottom of the tank. She had been in the captivity of this Wendigo for a few days now. Eva did it to herself, being she didn't trust anyone. This situation only confirmed her paranoia, but she did do it to herself. She knew this man was dangerous, but curiosity kills the cat, or guts the fish. How long was he going to keep her before feasting on her? Maybe she should have made more friends, and even kept in contact with her father's people. At least then she would have protection. Jamal would be checking in soon, hopefully he would find her. No doubt Giovanni would be looking Eva as well thought herself as she swam to the top of the tank. The door to the shed opened and her eyes darted to the figure. Jack walked in with a platter of food. He would bring her food often, but she always refused it, but she was beginning to get frail, and soon would not deny what he offered. "Evangeline, my darling, you need to eat." He walked in and sat the tray down on the small shelf that hung over her tank. "You know, I have gotten very fond of you. Most of the time I would just eat the captured, but I enjoy looking at you. Like a beautiful fish and all in one." His hand dipped into the water and felt the warm water. "I think after I eat your wolf friend, if he ever shows up, I will keep you." He nodded to himself and put his hand back into his pockets. "I was supposed to turn you over, but I fancy you." He studied her a bit more as his eyes wandered about. "You know, if you would only cooperate, I could give you everything you desire. Riches. National galleries." He shrugged and wasn't going to waste his time talking to her if she was just going to ignore him, so he turned and walked out. Eva couldn't fight it anymore. The aroma was too much, and she greedily ate the food when he walked out. She didn't even use the fork and knife given to her. Her hands shoveled food into her mouth with spite. She had to hang on and pray her friends would rescue her. Chapter 14. Eva was right, Jamal would look for her. The doctor had noticed Eva missing one day when he went to her clothes gallery. He had remembered Eva telling him about Jamal, so the doctor gave him a call. He was worried something had happened to her and knew if anyone could find her, this Rougarou wolf could. Jamal stopped by Evangeline's work first. The wolf checked around the building, but nothing looked odd or out of place. The wolf then decided to try her home. It was away from the city, more in the back country along the bayou. It was also the same place that creature had attacked her. Jamal searched the outside a bit before going to her home. He knocked on the door, but no one was home. Jamal let himself in and looked around. Eva was not there, and the mermaid was most likely in trouble. The scent Jamal picked up was poor. No one had been here for quite some time, which was odd. He knew mermaids were very protective over their safe havens. He dug around her place, looking for any clues. He noticed an address to a Jack circled in her planner. The wolf decided to go pay this guy a visit. He knew that Jack would know something and hoped that the creature that attacked her a few weeks ago didn't hurt her. Following the address, the wolf pulled up at the large plantation home. His attention and senses on high alert. He walked up the porch steps and glanced over to the shed on the side of the house. Something wasn't right and he could feel it. The night air and the sight of the male coming out of the front door sent a chill up the wolf's spine. He knew this man was evil. Evening, Jamal Robichaud with pack security. He flashed his badge as he approached the male. Jack took a glance at the badge, but was not very interested in it. What caught him was the strong scent that the male gave off. It was familiar. "Are you yourself a supernatural?" Jack asked, looking deep in the eyes of Jamal. Jamal lifted a brow as he put his badge away. "Yes. Now have you seen a female by the name of Evangeline?" he asked. "What are you?" Jack practically ignores Jamal's question. "It doesn't matter. What matters is, have you seen Evangeline Legnon?" Jamal spoke a bit harshly. The wolf narrowed his eyes at Jack. The two had a bit of a stare-off for a moment. "Mr. Robichaud, why don't you come in and we can speak on this, Ms. Legnon?" Jack stepped aside to allow Jamal to enter his home. Jamal kept his eyes narrowed on Jack, trying to figure him out. The smell Jack emitted seemed familiar to him. The two stood in silence for a bit longer before Jamal brushed past him and into his home. As soon as Jamal entered, he could smell that she had been in here. Now the tricky part was finding out what this Jack was and finding her alive. Jamal looked around at the male's home a bit as Jack stood in the large entryway. "Nice home." The wolf turned to watch Jack enter in behind him and close the door. "Why, thank you. I recently had renovations done, and Ms. Legnon has helped with the decor." Jack walked towards the large fireplace and stoked the fire. Jamal watched his every move just like the cat he was. "When was that?" Jamal asked. "Can I get you a drink?" Jack turned to ask. "No thank you. When was the last time you have seen Ms. Legnon?" he asked again, getting frustrated. Jack was dancing around the questions and Jamal wanted answers. "Tell me, why did you become a security agent?" he asked, leaning on his fireplace. Jamal kept a hardcore stare on the male. Jamal took a deep breath. He would play along with this male if he could get info. "After I left the NOLA police, I started up my security company, PAX, to help people and keep them safe." "Safe?" Jack asked. Jamal tried to keep his cool and play along. "Protecting supernatural and humans alike." Jamal spoke again. "Now, when is the last time you have seen Eva?" he asked a bit more harshly. "Am I getting to you, Mr. Robichaud?" Jack asked with a grin. Jamal stepped towards him a bit with a hard frown on his face towering over this Jack. Jamal was buff and over 6'5". Jack was slender and only stood but 5'11". Eva noticed the headlights peek through the wood beams of the barn. She swam to the top of the tank and watched as the male walked to the porch. She couldn't quite hear everything, but she noticed the large frame, and she knew it had to be Jamal. Eva had to get out while she could. Her arm reached out the small slot towards the fork Jack had left behind with her tray. The tray fell to the floor, but the mermaid managed to grab the fork. She quickly picked the lock, being raised by an outlaw. This kind of stuff came naturally, and wiggled out the tank. She grabbed a sheet and wrapped herself in it before stumbling to the house on 2 feet. Jamal held out a photo of Evangeline to Jack. "Where's Eva?" he asked again, trying to keep his cool. Jack picked up a glass of whiskey and took a sip. "Maybe." His grin was cold. "Enough games, where's Miss Legnon?" Jamal demanded. "I had employed her to acquire paintings for this old plantation. She delivered them to my home and had dinner with me, then left." Jack took another sip. "Where did she leave to?" Jamal asked, playing along. He knew this Jack had something to do with her disappearance. Jack glanced at the fire in the fireplace before walking around Jamal. "Look, I told you all I know. She came and she..." But just as he was about to finish, a fork came down and stabbed him in the back. Jack let out a demonic scream and stumbled to the side. Jamal watched with wide eyes, trying to take everything in. Eva stood there half wet with nothing but a sheet wrapped around her, while Jack was screaming and turning into his true Wendigo form. Jamal quickly took his jacket off and loosened his belt and pants. Before the Wendigo could strike at the brave mermaid, the giant lichen Raugaru leaped out of his clothes and pounced on the Wendigo. Teeth, antlers, claws and fur flew across the room. The two rolled around the large dining room, knocking everything over. Eva was still weak and did her best to keep from falling over. The mermaid did her best to race towards the doorway, as the two battled it out behind her. The Wendigo was equally strong to the wolf, each hitting and striking each other, but none going down. The Wendigo somehow got around to Jamal's neck and squeezed. The wolf pawed at the air and tried to bite the Wendigo, but it was no use. Eva paused and looked back at the fight. She could have kept going and left, but she knew she had to do something to help. Jamal saved her twice now and she owed him one. The two shuffled in front of the fire, and Eva finally got an idea. She let out a scream and using all her might she charged the two. She ran into Jamal and pushed the two into the fire. The Wendigo screamed and let go of the wolf. Its dead matted fur and skin was on fire as Jack ran out the fireplace, then jumped out the window. Jamal held a protective hold on Eva and rolled out the fire. The brave girl risked her life to help the wolf, and knowing fire wouldn't hurt him as much, he rolled out. The wolf stood up and shook his head coughing and using his paw to remove the ashes from his face. His skin was unmarked by the flames, but the Wendigo took a big hit and was a flame ball. Now Jamal knew Jack's weakness, and Jack knew the wolf's. Eva was on the floor coughing as she held onto Jamal's paws. "Are you alright?" Jamal asked as he shifted back into his human form. Eva nodded and it was enough for Jamal. The wolf grabbed his clothes and dressed himself before leaping out the window to chase the Wendigo. The fireball of a Wendigo ran into the dark woods, lighting it up. Screams and scratches along with orange filled the darkness. Jamal went about halfway into the woods and stopped. The Wendigo was nowhere to be found, and he knew he could easily track him, but needed to get Eva to safety and a doctor. The mermaid looked frail and weak. The wolf ran back to the plantation quickly. Jamal then made his way to the girl, giving her his jacket. "We are going to get you to safety, Eva. I am bringing you to Giovanni." Chapter 15. Jamal rushes Eva into the small clinic yelling out for the doctor. The mermaid was not missing for long, but the time she was, the stress and lack of substance did a number on her body. Jamal laid her down on the examination bed as the vampire came running in. He quickly took her vitals and yelled for his nurse. The nurse came to his voice ready to assist. "I need to get an IV in her." He placed his hand on her forehead and whispered in her ear. Jamal stood on the other side of the room hoping she would be okay. The wolf watched the doctor and nurse work on Eva. He did his best not to show his nervousness for the situation, but it was plastered on his face. A few minutes later Giovanni stabilized her. Jamal breathed a sigh of relief. Eva fell asleep as Giovanni turned to face the wolf. "Thank you, Mr. Roberto. How much do I owe?" the doctor asked. "Nothing. Eva's father had asked me to look out for her," Jamal explained. "Very well. Please, do stay and look over her while I attend to my other patients." Giovanni turns and walks out the room. The nurse finished setting up Eva's IV, and then turned to follow the doctor out. Jamal finally let the breath he was holding out and pulled a chair towards the bed. He took a seat and watched the mermaid sleep. He was so afraid he had lost her. The wolf may have just met her, but Eva was a sweet girl. If she was to perish, Jamal would never forgive himself. He had made an oath to his friend Henry to protect her. The wolf did just that. He sat by her beside and watched her until she awoke a few hours later. Her green eyes fluttered open and glanced over towards Jamal. She tried to sit up, but Jamal stopped her. "Take it easy, Shah." He placed a hand on hers. "Jamal." Her voice crackled a bit. "Yes, you are safe. The doctor fixed you up." "Jack? Where is Jack?" She looked around in a panic. "He ran. But don't worry, you are safe here." Jamal tried to calm her down. Eva did ease up a bit, but she was still a little on the edge because of everything that happened. She had every right to be. The mermaid was stuffed and locked in a tank by a Wendigo. The psycho wanted her to either eat or keep as a pet, even didn't know which one, only that it was traumatic. We need to find him. She grits her teeth as her mood changed from fear to anger. Eva, don't Eva me. That thing attacked and locked me up in a tank. Eva growled. I get that, but we can't go right back running towards danger. Jamal raised his voice a little. Eva was about to argue back, but Giovanni walked in. I see you are doing better, he asked as he stood in front of her bed. Eva looked up at Giovanni and settled back down. Giovanni glanced at Jamal before walking on the other side of the bed. He checked out her vitals and took a deep breath. Please tell her to not try and go after the Wendigo. Jamal glanced at Giovanni. She doesn't have to worry about the Wendigo, because I will handle it, he explained. Oh? And how will you handle it? Eva asked. I will let the judge know. It is his job to deal with problem supernatural creatures anyways, correct? He lifted a brow. Jamal nodded in agreement. I agree, let them handle this, Eva. But Eva was being stubborn, just like her father. You are just going to let him go. Let the judges who locked you up deal with it. Eva scolded towards Giovanni. Yes. I am not going to get into hot water again with the judges, Evangeline. I have a practice that is legal, and I can't help other supernatural if I am locked up. Not many doctors like me are out there. Eva turned her attention to Jamal, trying to get a reaction out of him. He is right. I have a legal job as well. Eva, let the judges handle it. Cowards the lot. She stood up and wobbled a bit. Jamal went to help her, but she pushed him away. He attacked me and kidnapped me, and you both don't want to help me. Fine, I will do it myself. She goes to walk out, but Giovanni walks in front of her. His eyes almost glowed in anger. Stop acting like a brat. This is not very becoming of you, Eva. Think. If you go after him for revenge, Jack will be successful in what he was trying to do. The supernatural may be stronger, but this is the human world. The judges are the bridge between the two, they are the balance, and if we overstep they will shut us down. Now lay down and rest. He grew bold and stern with her. No, Eva shook her head. If you do not, Evangeline, I will put you down and strap you to that bed, and I am sure Jamal will aid me. I will chalk this up to delirium due to the lack of fluids now, if you would be so kind to take your bed, Ms. Legnon. He almost growled. She had no choice. The vampire alone was stronger than her and could overpower her, but if Jamal helped, she had no chance in leaving. She turned and sat back in her bed. Eva, Jamal spoke, trying to smooth things over. I am tired, leave me. She threw the blanket over her face. Jamal stood up and shook his head as he glanced at Giovanni. Giovanni stood up straight and put his hands behind his back. We shall take our leave to let the patient rest. Eva cringed under the blanket at how he called her his patron. She was more than that to him, she knew it, and he did as well. Giovanni just wanted to prove a point and piss her off. Jamal sighed deeply and threw his hands in the air. Look, if you need help, just call me Doc. And with that, the wolf walked out the room. He was not going to get wrapped up in this drama anymore. He did his job. Eva was safe and in safe hands with the doctor. From the looks of it, Giovanni had everything under control, so there was no need for him to stick around any longer. Plus, the whole lovers' quarrel was not something he wanted to be in the middle of. Jamal walked out to his truck and made his way back to his office building. He was sure he had plenty of other work to do. Giovanni turned and went to walk out. He pauses at the door and turns to face the bed one last time. I do this because I love you. You will understand when you think clearer. He waited for Eva to reply, but there was nothing but silence. He slowly walked out and locked the door behind him. As he walked down the hallway, the vampire retrieved his cell phone from his long black coat. He dialed the FBI's black files to place a complaint and to file a report on the Wendigo. He knew Eva would eventually get over it and forgive him, but the judges would not be so forgiving. If Giovanni was wrapped into trouble again, he would most likely face death. His lawyer may have got him off, but it was only due to his special abilities and the fact that supernatural doctors were rare. The judges knew they needed Giovanni, so they let him out under probation. "Hello, yes Judge Jameson, I have some info on your Wendigo." His voice echoed as he turned to walk towards his office. Chapter 16. The Coven House. Claire returned from her trip to see the house a ruin and most of her sisters dead. No doubt this was the work of the judges and the FBI. They were slowly moving in on the Coven, and Claire knew her time was short. Her powers were also draining. Claire is weak since the loss at the House of the Rising Sun last year, and her powers from Meph were almost gone. The witch needs her daughter Evangeline, so she can gain power again. She sent Jack, her Wendigo, to fetch her, but it had been some time since she had heard from him. Claire walked to her office quickly. Her high heels clicked on the wood floors as she passed by the many rooms that lined the hallway. She finally reached her office and picked up the receiver. "Was Jack successful in acquiring my daughter?" her dry tone asked. "I believe so, but I have not heard from him yet. The agency here is on the lookout for us. I have been sending out people to look for them." A voice replied on the other end. "Well done, now bring Evangeline in, and the Wendigo soon," Claire hissed. Eva was her daughter, and though she didn't raise her, she thought Henry, Meph's son, would have taken her somewhere safer. She was lucky the merman was a creature of habit and did not stray far from the city of New Orleans. He was too much like his father, business before family. Claire needed to find Jack and pick up her daughter. Since the 1800s she had been madams to the house and caretaker to all. Her once evil heart had melted the day she gave birth to Eva. She knew Meph would enslave her daughter like herself, and wanted a better life for her. But nothing good came out of a life when you were related to a fallen angel. Now that Meph was gone, she really needed her daughter beside her. Most likely the mermaid would have magic that could boost her own. Suddenly a little red fox ran into her office and barked up at her. "I am guessing you found the Wendigo?" she asked. The fox barked and twirled a bit. "I will have a word with Jack. Bring him in quickly." Claire ordered the fox, and he took off running out the back door. Jack followed Corbin, the little fox, through the back of the entrance. He led him through the Coven house, and the wounded Wendigo followed towards his mistress's office. The fox barked and scratched at her door furiously. The witch opened the door and beckons them to quickly come in. She wrapped a hand around the Wendigo and helped him in her office. The fox ran and jumped on her couch and barked a bit. Claire helped the Wendigo to a chair and put her hands on her hips. "What happened to you?" she demanded an explanation. Corbin jumped into her arms and licked her face as the Wendigo grunted. She held the fox as Jack explained everything to her. Jack explained how he had Eva, but she was saved by a Rougarou. He fought the male furiously but was unsuccessful. She sat holding and stroking Corbin's fur as she tried to process it all. Claire sat the fox down and walked to the Wendigo. "I believe I can fix the burn marks. But you need to get Eva, Jack." "Is she all right?" she asked. "Your daughter is fine." He hissed and grunted in pain. "I swear, I am always in some kind of mess." She cursed in German and walked to her desk to find a bottle. "I will get your daughter mistress, unharmed as promised." Jack watched her mix a potion in her cauldron. "I know, Jack, I trust your skills." Meanwhile, the fallen angel Sam admired his reflection in his gold palace about the city of Las Vegas. His mistress Michelle walked in and wrapped her arms around him. She planted a kiss on his cheek, and he smiled. "I believe it is time we bring the little mermaid in and let her know what is going on," he spoke up. Michelle smiled, revealing her fangs. His little vampire was eager to please Samuel. She walked around to stand in front of him and adjusted his suit coat. "You want me to go get her?" she asked. "That would be lovely, my dear. Anything for you, Sam." She winks and steals a kiss before teleporting out. Eva was one of the last remaining pieces to his puzzle he needed. Once she was in place and Claire disposed of, he could send his armies and start his plan to take over the city. No one would be able to stop him, not the FBI agent, nor the judges. The morning fog had given way to the warm afternoon sun. The air had a chill to it, but that didn't discourage Eva from standing on the back porch while painting. The canvas sat on the easel as the brush in Eva's hand made soft strokes across it. Her painting was dark, much like she felt lately. The mermaid in the painting was half submerged, and only the tip of her gray-colored tail poked out of the ocean's surface. She was looking up at the black and gray clouds that loomed over her head, while the rain pelted down upon her. A streak of lightning decorated the canvas from the sky, and seemed to be headed straight for the mermaid that had breached the ocean's surface. Eva stood back looking at the painting as she reached for her coffee cup, bringing the dolphin-decorated ceramic mug to her lips. Her gaze was broken as she heard a knock at her front door. After setting the mug down, she grabbed a rag and wiped her hands of the paint that spotted her hands. When she opened the front door, there stood a blonde-haired woman with dark chocolate eyes. Eva listened with curiosity as she spoke, and when she finished, Eva half chuckled. "Answers? No one has those. The only one who did have been dead for a while. So be gone." Eva huffed. "So go tell whoever it is to blow off. If they want to see me, they come to me." Michelle was afraid of this. She tried once more to get her to come along willingly. Seeing as Eva was a supernatural being, compelling her would not work. "Look, Ms. Legnon, I can't tell you what it is you are to be told. I can only tell you it will be worth your while. Please, why don't you come with me?" This woman was persistent and made Eva a bit more than annoyed. Why couldn't the woman just take no for an answer? "I said no. I am not going anywhere with you or anyone else to be put into some cage and put on display. So, you can blow off too." Michelle shook her head. "I am very sorry to hear that. You're going to make me miss a very scenic drive back." She lightly hissed and without warning, reached out, grabbing Eva's arm, and immediately teleporting them both back to the penthouse she shared with Samuel. "Sammy baby, we have company." Sam was on the phone with his witch who ran the casino and hotel for him. He hadn't heard back from Chloe, so he was asking Ro if she might have heard anything. When Samuel heard Michelle's voice, he quickly hung up with the witch. He had more important things to do right now. This mermaid was an asset to his main plan. He needed to gain her trust and loyalty in order to make it work. He needed both Legnon siblings on board. He passed by one of his numerous mirrors to check his appearance before walking towards the sound of her voice. "Ah, my Goldie, glad you were able to acquire our guest." He motioned them to come forward and to sit in the living area. Come, don't be shy, you're a guest, and I would have word with you." Sam plopped down on the cream-colored love seat and leaned back waiting for the girls. "Anything you want or need? Drinks? Food? Souls?" He chuckled. Eva had nearly fallen backwards as they appeared in the posh penthouse. She whirled around looking at the blonde female who smiled the moment she saw Sam. "What the heck am I doing here?" she yelled. The other woman walked up to Sam, whispered something in his ear, and kissed his cheek before leaving the room. Eva was left standing there with her arms crossed over her chest. "What I want is to be returned home. Is it your habit to send your minions to kidnap individuals?" Eva paced the floor back and forth. The longer she was there, the angrier she became. Her eyes started to glow a bright green. "I'm here now. You may as well tell me what you want." Her tone was angry as she spoke. "Eva, do you know what you really are? Where did you come from? Or how your father died? Sam stood up and walked to his minibar. He poured himself a drink and took a slow sip. I am willing to tell you everything, if you would only hear me out, for your enemies are my enemies. I apologize for having you brought here, but your life is in great danger. His voice was sweet and low. What did your woman call you? Sam? Eva walked toward the man. His penthouse was posh and exquisitely decorated. Her gaze narrowed and she shook her head. Of course, I know what I am. I'm a freaking mermaid. And if you think I'm going to be allowed to be stuffed into some aquarium, you have another thing coming. She stopped in the middle of her next thought at the mention of her father. What do you know of my father? She spit the words out as if they were poison. You are not just a mermaid, my dear, you are from the line of Inonu, the queen of the coast. The queen of the marine spirits. If you only knew your potential. He paused and took another sip. Your father was a son of the fallen angel Meph. You are royalty on both sides. He smiled and continued to speak. Do you know why you were locked in that tank? I give you a few guesses. He smirked a bit. Eva laughed out loud. You have your female bring me here just so you can fill my head full of lies. No. My mother was a pathetic human who could not handle having a mermaid for a daughter. My father is a simple merman. She threw her head back, laughing again. And you are trying to tell me my grandfather is the fallen angel Meph? She stopped and thought for a moment. I was locked in the blasted tank by a Wendigo that wanted to put me on display before eating me. She spat sarcastically and did not believe a word he said. Jack works for your mother. How do you think he found you? The same mother who worked for that fallen angel who wants you. She wants you for power. Poor Eva, knowing nothing. You think a human could have birthed a mermaid? He let out a laugh and finished his drink. But if you want to go back to that tank and be controlled by them, go ahead. He looked at his reflection in the glass. Just remember how many times your father lied to you, used you, even tried to marry you off. He let out a chuckle. You know James is still alive. Eva couldn't help but to listen to what Sam said. Some of it struck her. She hated that place. House of the Rising Sun. It made her sick. Okay, so start spilling it, Sam. I want to know everything. Who my mother is. Everything. Even her uncle Laphite had told her it was impossible for a human to give birth to a mermaid child. She just chose to ignore it as him rambling. Like I said, I want the truth. Even if it is coming from you. James. Why would I care if he is alive? I never wanted to marry him. Her mind wandered back to the many times her father had kept things from her and lied to her. It was something they had argued about horribly at one time. What if Sam was right about what he was saying? The seed of doubt was already planted firmly in her mind, and the only thing to do was to hear him out. Sam poured him another drink and walked to the lavesiette. He sat down and crossed his leg. Meph loves to have lots of children to spread his seed and up his power, also to serve him and create more business. Business is everything to him. He explained to her about his witch that runs the house for him, and how her and her father had an affair. How Claire sent her away for unknown reasons and Henry to raise her. Henry, much like his father, was all about business. How wanting her to marry his business partner to keep her close. See now that Meph is no longer in the picture. Claire, she is aging, and in order to keep things on the up and up she needs you. You are Meph's last relative in the south besides your brother, well, half-brother. He runs the docks in New Orleans. Sam paused to drink. Are you following along, my dear? Her eyes glowed a brighter shade of green as her ire grew. Truth was, she would love to confront her mother. Eva shook her head at the thought of being Mephistopheles' granddaughter. She honestly wanted to confront him too, but he was gone. A mixture of anger, hurt and betrayal swelled inside of her. What this fallen angel told her all made sense now. Fissionable. I'm no side freak show. and certainly not in league with that so-called family of mine. She looked at Sam through her angered eyes. Listening to the whole sordid thing, Eva grew angrier. Deep down she knew it was the truth. No matter how awful it was. What help could you offer? And what do you want in return? Meph used to own that whole city, of course you didn't know. Your father never told you because it wouldn't have been to his gain. All your life you have been lied to, used, manipulated, and shoved off. Isn't time for Madame Legnon, get what she is due. To confront that mother of yours and to get to know that brother of yours. He finished his drink. I am just offering you help to take back what belongs to you. To become the predator. You are not the fish in the bowl. Sam's words came out like silk as he spoke to the mermaid. I have spoken with Henry Jr., your brother, and he would much like to meet you. Eva sat thinking about all that had been said. She wanted nothing to do with her so-called family, and learned that not only was her mother a witch, but her grandfather a fallen angel was just a bit much. She was more than angry and wanted to lash out. The thought of taking them all out intrigued her. Taking a deep breath, she slowly nodded. Fine. I want the lot of them gone. What do we need to do? An almost sneer crossed her face. You need to visit that mother of yours and dispose of her. And do not listen to her lies. Kill her, you are the only one who can. You come from her flesh, so you can kill her. After that, then I can make a few moves on my own. I will move my men in and help set up an army led by you and your brother. Meanwhile you need to focus on meeting the junior and his docs. I am sure you two have a lot to talk about. He rose from his seat. Michelle will aid you in as much as you need, and if you trust that wolf fellow I suggest you don't. He pledged loyalty to your father. Eva glared at him. Kill her? Just like that. She snapped her fingers as she spoke. It's all quite simple to you, isn't it? How do you suggest I kill the old witch? If I am the only one who can. Yes, like that. Just like how she got rid of you. What kind of mother does that? I am sure once she sees you, she will try to kill you or turn you to her side, but all of them are tricksters, all eyes. Sam turned to face the setting sun out of the penthouse window. What happened to my father? Eva asked. Sam almost forgot he promised her answers on that, but these answers would be a lie. He couldn't let her know that he killed Henry. The judges had him killed. They wanted to run the docks, I suppose, and your father was a bit old and wasn't doing a very good job. I want to be rid of those humans and judges. That is why I have my associate making a potion of a virus, that when in effect will cause all the humans to get sick. Then they will have to come to us for a cure. You see, Eva, I want to explain my empire, but to do that the humans need to be put in their place. How? And how are you going to release this virus? Will it not harm us? Christmas is the busiest shopping event of the year. Crowds all together all the time. It will be airborne and only affect humans, not us supernatural. We will soon take over this world, my dear, and the humans will be our slaves if they wish to live. She listened as he spoke, watching him stand at the window. Her so-called mother she could care less about. She never had one growing up, so why start now? Especially if she is a witch. It sickened her to know that blood ran in her veins. But it could also come in handy if she had inherited any of those abilities. Somehow, she knew what he said was all true. Since you seem to know everything else. Where can I find them? All in New Orleans. At the whorehouse, I imagine. She wasn't sure if she wanted to confront her brother or Claire first. Both were on her list. Also, how do I get in touch with you if I need you? Should I call your female? Eva asked. Yes, the Coven house is where your mother is. She tried to set up another house of the rising sun type place, but without Meph she hasn't got the power. Also, you can find me in any mirror, just call my name, and I should show it in the reflection. If Michelle wants to follow along, she can. I never made her do anything she didn't want to do. Sam answered. Well, if she would kindly return me home, I will start to deal with things tomorrow. I think I need a drink or two after learning all this. Sam pointed to the mirror on the back wall. Just think of where you want to go and step through. He walked to it and waved his hand over it. The solid mirror turned into a liquid silver shimmer. Have fun and remember to play nice with you, brother. He winked and walked out the room. The next day, Eva pulled on the leather jacket and checked herself in the mirror once more before grabbing her car keys and heading out the door. Everything Sam had told her replayed over and over again in her mind. The more those words echoed in her head, the angrier she got. Eva quickly locked her door as she left her home and got in her car. She would eventually tell Giovanni and Jamal, but right now she is heading straight for the docks in New Orleans. It was time she checked out that brother of hers. The drive from her bayou home didn't take too long, and soon she was pulling up to the docks and parking her car. She inhaled the damp air as she briefly shut her eyes, then slowly let out a long sigh. If she said she wasn't nervous, she'd be lying. Her shoes clicked on the ground beneath her feet as she made her way down the docks. Men were busy going about their daily work. Eventually she stopped and asked a rather burly man for help. Where can I find Henry Legnon? The man stopped and turned to face her with a smug smile. Only Legnon you'll find around here is Junior. He said and pointed down the docks. At the end. You can't miss him. Though he may be in his office this time of day. Eva thanked him and took off. She knew exactly where that office was because it had once belonged to her father. As she approached the small building, Eva stood in front of the door, remembering the last time she was here. She and her father had a huge fight, and they didn't talk much after that. Reaching out, she grabbed the doorknob and turned it, opening the door. A little bell rang over her head as she shut the door behind her. The man that walked out of the back room nearly made Eva's jaw drop. He was tall. Well over 6'4", easily and muscular. His long dark hair hung loosely about his shoulders and was in need of a shave. His dark eyes looked at her as if he knew who she was. Another male was with him. Shorter and smaller than Henry, and was holding a file in his hands as he went about reading it over. Henry Legnon Jr. Eva said, already knowing who was. Henry was nearly the spitting image of their father. Henry smirked. Depends on who is asking, Shaw. His deep voice echoed off the walls. Eva's gaze narrowed. I'm not really asking so much as telling. Her tone firm as she spoke. Henry laughed. You young lady are bold. I need to speak with you, Mr. Legnon, she said while never taking her eyes off of him. He walked toward her and stood looking down at her as he towered over her, a sneer on his face. Why? So, you can plunge a knife in my darn skull. He grabbed her by the arm tightly, looking at the man in the office. Leave. The man scurried out of the office quickly. The minute he was gone, Henry reached over and locked the door and lowered the blinds, letting her arm go. I wondered how long it would take before you showed up, Eva. Quite frankly, I would have expected you after the old man croaked. He let her arm go, and she stood there with a dazed look on her face. Her tone turned sarcastic. Gee, how could I do that when I never knew you existed until yesterday? But why should it surprise me? Henry never told me of you. There was a lot you left out. Like our fallen angel grandfather. And my witch mother. The whole thing made me sick to my stomach. But what shocked me the most is how Daddy died. How the hell could you let them kill him? We didn't see eye to eye, but dang. Her voice got louder as her temper flared. Henry ran a hand through his long messy hair and whirled around, getting right in Eva's face. You think I wanted to let it happen? He huffed and shook his head. Not likely, sis. Look. Whatever your differences with the old man were, they are not ours. I only knew about you because I overheard him talking about you a long time ago. I've been watching you every now and again. Why do you think I stayed around New Orleans anyway? It wasn't because I wanted to run this city. Henry now moved to pour himself a drink. Well, how about enlightening me then? Why did you stay? Her arms crossed over her chest, waiting for what she was sure to be a pack of lies. I did what I did to survive, Eva. You need to stay out of New Orleans. Stay in the swamps. You're safer there. Otherwise, they may insist on making it a family operation. Look, Eva. I have no beef with you. I never approached you because I knew there was a rift between you and Pops, and he was always adamant about never seeing you. So, I did it in my own way. Eva listened closely to every word. She knew he was being honest by the look in his brown eyes. But she still didn't like a lot of what she heard. So, being their pawn is better, huh? Isn't it, Henry? Her teeth gritted together as she spoke. I'm no one's pawn, Eva. Why can't you get it through that skull of yours? I do what I need to in order to survive, so I can do things to sabotage what Claire does. So, I can in my own way watch out after my little sister. Someone has to. You're careless enough. He shook his head and his tone softened. Look. I'm expecting one of the witch's men here in about an hour, and I want you long gone before that. He doesn't know you're back on this surface as far as I know. I want it to stay that way. Eva, don't let your differences with Pop be our differences. I'm not him. Go home. I promise I will be in touch in a couple of days. I'd like to get to know my sister. Samuel told me you are working for him. He also told me you are going to help him spread a virus to infect the humans. He did. Henry was a bit taken aback that Samuel would tell her all this. What else did he tell you? Henry asked. That the judges killed Dad. Henry knew that was a lie. Samuel killed Henry, but he would not tell Eva that. Samuel needs Eva on their side, and if she would comply, then Henry would gain his sister. If not, she would have to die. It was that simple. No one could interfere with the plans, not even his own family. Eva took what Henry said to heart. Maybe he was right, maybe he wasn't. But she had to find out. If what he said was true. All right, Henry, you know where to find me. I will be expecting you soon. With that, Eva left and headed back home. With her finally meeting her brother, she could move on to the next item on her list. Confronting Claire, then killing her. Jack the Wendigo walked on the old pirate ship. Henry Jr. stood on the side of the ship. The witch sent you? The merman asked. He tried to remain calm in the presence of the Wendigo. The merman was tired of serving them, but he had no choice. He had to make it look as if he was on their side to keep ties on them. Info was key in this operation, and Samuel didn't want Claire to suspect anything of his or Henry's involvement in the takeover. She wishes for you to be on guard and ready to attack that agency. The Coven House must stand, the agency must fall. The Wendigo hissed a bit with a wicked grin. Henry Jr. held a tight grip on the wood. His eyes flashing green a bit. They already know I am ready, why do they send you? To shove the servitude in my face and more. My father's soul was lost to my grandfather, and slowly I am losing mine. Henry Jr. wandered off into thought. I have no knowledge of any of this, like you I just serve the mistress. Jack used his finger to wipe the wood. A little dusty. He mocked the merman and the fact he was not able to leave the docks and be in the sea like a true merman. Henry Jr. turned and grabbed the jacket of the Wendigo, getting inches from his face. I suggest you leave and run back to that mistress of yours like a good pet, before I mount those horns on the front of my boat. Henry Jr.'s face inches from Jack's. Jack let out a chuckle and brushed the merman off. Easy sushi, I am just a messenger. Jack's eyes flashed black before making his way off the boat. Henry Jr. glared and watched the Wendigo walk off. It would be much easier to just kill him, you know this. Giovanni stepped from the shadow of the boat. Henry did not turn to face him, He was still watching as Wendigo walked off his docks. "Come, merman," Samuel calls. Giovanni beckons Henry to follow him. The two walks into Henry's cabin just as Samuel teleports through the mirror on Henry's wall. "Good you are both here. I have a feeling we need to accelerate our plans. Is the virus and antidote ready?" Giovanni nodded. "I have a few batches to roll out," he explained. "Why do we need to speed this up?" Henry asked. "The lion and his kitty cat attacked the Coven house. Pretty soon they will dispatch Claire and will turn their focus on you. Jacob already has his sights on you, Henry," Giovanni adds. "That judge is no threat to me. Don't get cocky. He has help. He may be young, but he is not too proud to ask for aid." Samuel hisses. Henry's jaw clenched in anger. He wanted to say something, but he held his tongue. "Be ready to roll out the virus by the end of the month. And make sure Eva visits Claire before Colin and his lackeys do. Eva must kill Claire. She must prove herself," Samuel demanded before entering the mirror again. The shimmering silver of the mirror that hung on the wall of the ship, when Samuel food trailed behind him as he stepped back into his penthouse. Evangeline, she knows Claire is her mother, but she does not know that Samuel killed her. "Our father," Henry explained to Giovanni. He didn't know the vampire well, but he knew his sister liked him. He had them followed and looked into. Henry knew the two had a romance on and off again over the years. "I need you to look after her, and make sure she is safe. Do not tell her anything." Henry points his finger at Giovanni. "I do not work for you, merman, I work for Samuel. However, I do admire and care for Evangeline. I will do what I must to protect her." Chapter 17. A week later, Giovanni had made the virus and antidote like Samuel asked, but the vampire was starting to grow a conscience. It was a selfish reason to be concerned, but it was still a conscience in his mind. If he went through with this, many supernatural beings would most likely be slaughtered by the judges. It would be a war, not a peaceful transition as the Fallen One wanted. The vampire knew Samuel really wanted this war, and the Fallen One just covered the slaughter up with a peaceful handover promise. Humans would not do that. The judges would not either. If the virus hit them, they would consider it war, and the slaughter would be great on both ends. Unlike Samuel, Giovanni was once human. Years of a darkened soul made his actions seem horrible, but he only did things to pursue science. Humans did this all the time in the name of science, so who was really the bad guy here? Unknown to Samuel and Henry, Giovanni had made a deal with the judges in order to be freed from prison. It was not just so he could help the supernatural in their medical ailments. The judges needed more leverage than that. The doctor would give the cowed judges and the black files info on any suspicious activity in return for his freedom. Others would think he sold out, of course, but in reality, the doctor was just looking after himself. Also, after thinking things over, this war would affect Eva. If the judges found out Samuel was pushing her to work for him, and she was a part of this virus, she would be killed for sure. Giovanni could not allow this. Eva was the one person in this world beside himself he cared for. After finishing up his rounds at the clinic, Giovanni had his nurse close up the building, as he made his way towards the Black Files Agency building. If Henry was having him tailed, he could simply say he had to check in due to his probation, which was not a lie. What Giovanni would leave out is the fact he was going there to tell the whole truth about everything, and make a deal for Eva. The rest of those fools could die or rot in jail for all he cared. Giovanni entered the building and let the receptionist at the front know he needed to speak to the judges. The female receptionist then led the doctor towards the back. She led him to the conference room where Jacob and Colin were steady working on the case. Giovanni walked in slowly and Jacob almost jumped out of his chair. "Easy, Judge. I am here to fulfill my part of the agreement, and that is..." Colin lifted a brow as he held a file in one hand and a coffee mug in the other. You would think you, judges, would have better communication between you all. The kingdom of darkness is outshining you in that department, obviously. Giovanni rolled his eyes and took a seat at the end of the table. Colin sat his coffee down and gave the doctor a Jameson stare of disappointment. So, are you going to tell us what is going on? Or Jacob looked at Giovanni and then towards Colin. The young judge was very lost and wanted to know what was going on. From the looks of it, Colin was just as lost as Jacob. Giovanni sighed deeply and rolled his eyes before speaking. I was released from prison by the count and put on probation. As part of the deal, I was to report anything I came across. So, the plague doctor has become the very thing he swore to fight, Jacob said with a smirk. Is that a black plague joke? Colin turned and asked. Not a very good one. It was the fleas, not the rats themselves, that caused the plague, but yes. I am a glorified rat or snitch. Giovanni was not happy about any of this, and it showed on his face as well as in the tone of his voice. Colin put the folder down now and crossed his arms. This was going to be good. Jacob took a seat and gave the doctor his full attention. If you have not figured out just yet, Samuel is trying to take over this city. We know. Colin interrupted. Giovanni paused and gave Colin a glare. However, the way he wants to go about it would not only endanger the humans, but the supernatural as well. What are you going on about? Colin spoke in an annoyed tone as he wanted him to get to the point. I am talking about the fact Samuel made me create a virus to affect humans. His plan was to release it so he could control them. The humans would come to him and his people for the antidote. I do believe this is an awful idea. It would only cause a war. Our kind, the innocent ones caught up in the fallen angels and demons' plans, to be slaughtered. I am a doctor. I help cure my kind, not send them to their death. To avoid this war and death on both sides, I decide to tell you. All I ask is for Eva. What does she have to do with this? Samuel wants her and her brother to work for him. I will try and convince her to leave with me. I want no one else to interfere with us. I would appreciate this greatly. But what if she won't go? What if she wants the slaughter? Jacob asked in almost a growl. If she does something and must be put down, at least give me the right to do it. I love her, and if she should die by anyone beside my hand, I would most likely take revenge. You can have Henry and his men for all I care. I only want Evangeline. As I recall, she had nothing to do with her family and its trauma until now. So, your revenge against them has nothing to do with her, Judge Davison. Giovanni looked at the board they were making. It had not only his face pinned to it, but others as well, including Claire and her pets. The Wendigo is with Claire. The doctor's eyes shifted to Colin. How do you know this? Colin perked up. The lion was almost in disbelief. I know this because Henry is still pretending to be under their command. As a peace offering, I can tell you where that hideout is. Okay. Where is it? Do I have your word that Eva will be entrusted to me? Yes, you bloody muppet. Now tell me where Claire and the Wendigo are. Giovanni glared at Colin for a moment. The lion's eyes flashed a golden hue, and the doctor stood up. He walked past them and towards the map they had pinned to the board. This house here is one of her hideouts. It was the house where Kitty and Colin had almost been overrun by witches. Claire mainly stays here, by the Chalmette battlefield. Yes, she is trying to buy the Malus Borgard house to turn it into another house like that of the Rising Sun. She is staying on a river steamboat that is docked at the Creole Queen Dock. That is a historical site, set aside as a museum. Look, I don't know anything about the humans and such, but the land is full of energy, and she wants that place. That is where you will find her and Jack the Wendigo. Giovanni adjusted his coat and turned to walk out the room. As the doctor walked out and the door, it inched close. Colin caught sight of Kitty glaring at the map and then at him. Colin then watched her take off. The lion cursed and grabbed his coat. In doing so, he spilled his coffee everywhere. What is going on? Jacob perked up and glanced around, trying to figure out why Colin was in a rush. Get that, will ya? I have to go and stop a murder cat. Colin runs out the room and after Kitty. Kitty hopped on Jacob's motorbike. She sped down the narrow streets of New Orleans towards the place where the doctor pointed out on the map. She only had one thing on her mind. The Wendigo would die tonight and anyone else who stood in her way. Kitty pulled up at the small dock that ran along the old battlefield. It was closed and no one from the public was around, which was a good thing. She knew Colin would blow a gasket if anyone innocent was hurt. Kitty could care less, but she respected Colin. She parked the bike and made her way down the dock towards the large steamboat. The Creole Queen sat in the water docked. Normally the steamboat was just for tourists, but the witch bought it out and was renovating it to not only bring tourists of humankind, but her kind as well. Kitty stopped dead in her tracks as she watched Jack walk onto the deck of the ship and light a cigarette. His nose went in the air as he sniffed it slightly. He then turned to face Kitty and grinned. The Wendigo took another puff of his cigarette and walked to the balcony. Well, if it isn't Miss Kitty herself. Where's your lion boyfriend? He asked. Kitty kept quiet and just gave him a murderous glare. The Wendigo took another drag from his cigarette before tossing it into the water. The Wendigo then signaled for the others to start the boat as he turned to walk back inside. He did not want to cause a scene on their new property. Claire for sure would have a fit if he did. Jack would take this fight downriver. Kitty turned to notice the boat pulling away from the docks. The tiny woman took off and ran towards the boat. She leaped in the air and clung to the railing of the balcony. Without missing a beat, she climbed over and ran inside to confront the Wendigo. Jack was right inside to meet her. Jack tried to hit her with a right hook, but the quick reflexes she had, Kitty dodged it. The Wendigo continues to throw punches at Kitty, but she dodges everyone. The angry feline was focused. Kitty ducked one last time before using her knife to get one quick jab. The Wendigo grabbed her wrist as he tried to twist the knife inside him. With his own quick reflexes and strength, he tossed her across the dining room area. Kitty skidded across tables and chairs but landed on her feet. The Wendigo might have been stabbed, but it wasn't too bad an injury for him. He pushed past the sting of the stab wound as he followed after the cat. Kitty kicked away the chairs in front of hers and made herself ready for the advancing Wendigo. The sun had just started to set over the horizon as Colin pulled up behind the bike. He quickly put the car in park and jumped out. The judge's eyes then wandered to the boat that was making its way down the river. No doubt Kitty was already on board. Colin knew he would have to shift to make that jump. However, the judge did not like to shift into his lion form. Colin was afraid he would lose control in that state, and someone would get hurt due to his rage. Colin had no choice. Kitty was in danger, and over the past year, the judge had grown fond of her. A Wendigo was an extremely difficult supernatural creature to kill. It was up there with a demon, so if he did interfere, the cat, no matter how skilled she was, would perish. Colin ripped off his jacket, tie and ripped his shirt open. He then unbuttoned his pants and shifted into a huge lion while running. The lion ran along the dock while the boat slowly made its way down the river. The boat reached the end of the dock, and Colin had to make the jump. He leaped in the air and nearly missed the large steamboat, but his paws gripped the railing. He used his back claws to dig into the side of the wooden boat to push himself up and over the side. As the lion made his way inside, his golden eyes scanned the area. At the opposite end of the first level, which was a dining area, the Wendigo had Kitty in a chokehold up against a wall. Even though Jack's long black talons choked her, Kitty steadily did her best to fight back. The cat's kicks to his groin and stabs on his gangly arms were to no avail. The Wendigo steadily choked the woman's tiny throat. Colin let out a growl as he ran full force for the Wendigo. Tables and chairs were no match for the pure force and muscle of the large lion. Colin tackled the creature down and began to thrash him his large claws and teeth. Kitty fell to the ground gasping for air. She was down only for a moment to catch her breath. The Wendigo did his best to block the lion's paws, but the claws slashed him deep. The Wendigo head-butted the lion and used his deer-like horns to stab Colin. Colin roared in pain and was rolled off the Wendigo. Kitty didn't miss a beat as she slid by and began slashing and stabbing the creature. The Wendigo was growing slower from the blood loss as he tried to slash at Kitty. Colin pushed past the pain and slashed out at the Wendigo with his claws. Colin made contact with his paw to the Wendigo's back and clawed downward. The Wendigo arched his back and yelled in pain as the claws of the lion tore at his flesh. As Jack let out an inhuman scream, Kitty hopped on top of his chest and started to stab the Wendigo with fury. Colin tried to leap up and grab the Wendigo's throat, but Jack went forward a bit. Colin then aimed for the antlers. He latched onto the creature's antler and began to pull him down to the ground. The Wendigo felt the pull of his antlers and panicked. Jack backhanded Kitty hard to get her off his chest. When Jack knocked Kitty off his chest, it allowed him to rotate and attack Colin. The creature used his claws to swing at the massive lion. Colin tried to dodge them as he held onto the antlers, but the claws of the creature were long and swift. Colin let out grunts and growls of pain as the Wendigo slashed at his face and arms. Kitty was growing tired, but she could not give up. This Wendigo was responsible for Freddy's death, and the cat was going to make sure the Wendigo would meet the same fate. She threw her dagger straight into Wendigo's open wounds from the lion's claw marks. It fazed him slightly, as he stopped clawing at Colin when the knives went into his back. One hand reached out to grip the lion's mane to try and pull Colin off his antlers, as his other hand tried to get the knives out his back. Kitty broke a piece of wood off a chair and leaped up to jam it in the Wendigo's back. It went through its ribs and out the front of his chest. The Wendigo flung Colin off him and slumped forward. The lion skid across the wooden floor. The Wendigo threw up blood as he tried to run away from the pair. Colin and Kitty were both breathing heavily as they glanced at each other. Fire! Colin managed to get out. Kitty knew exactly what he meant. Fire was the only way to kill this beast. The Wendigo pushed his way past a few guards as he tried to exit the first level. He then pulled out the piece of wood and dropped it as he made his way up towards the second level. Colin and Kitty rushed the two guards and made short work of them. Kitty then ran past and followed the blood trail the Wendigo left. She was smaller than the massive lion, so she was able to maneuver in the boat faster than the lion. Even though Kitty was injured, she ran with all her might up the stairs of the second level. When she reached the second level, the Wendigo was nowhere to be found. The blood continued up to the third level where the captain's cabin was. She quickly ran up the small flight of stairs and towards the door. Kitty could hear the lion panting as he tried to catch up to her. The cat did not wait. She flung open the door and glared at the Wendigo. Jack was in his human form, bloody and beaten. His labored breathing and the amount of blood leaking down his side let the cat know he was weak. Colin let her know she needed fire, but where would she get it? Instead of going up, Colin went down a level to the boiler room of the ship. He ran towards the control and turned the wheel with his teeth to full speed ahead. He then ripped the handle off and spit it on the ground. Another guard came around the corner and fired at the lion. Colin dodged it as the bullets ricocheted off, hitting gaskets and glass. The guard continued to fire, hitting wires and causing sparks. A small fire erupted and began to spread as the guard continued to fire shots at Colin. The lion leaped out and grabbed the man and mauled him to death. He then turned and made his way up towards the third level. "You're one determined woman, I give you that." Jack spoke in a raspy voice as he snickered at Kitty. Kitty slowly walked forward ready to pounce. Smoke lingered up from the third level, and the Wendigo got a whiff of the smoke and panic set into his eyes. He slowly shifted into his true image, the creature. He screamed at Kitty and slashed towards her. Kitty ducked and kicked him hard in his injured ribs. Like an injured and corner animal, the Wendigo did his best to fight Kitty. In the weakened state he was in, Jack was still powerful. Kitty and Jack fought in the small control room, breaking everything in the place. Colin burst through the door and was finally able to jump on the Wendigo. His jaws wrapped around and clamped down around his neck and held on. The Wendigo did his best to thrash, but Kitty grabbed a piece of glass and began stabbing him. The glass cut her hands as she stabbed the Wendigo in the gut. The creature went limp on Colin's jaws as a thick column of smoke curled into the room. Kitty dropped the glass and glared as the Wendigo passed out in the lion's mouth. He was not dead yet, but the fire would take care of it for them. Orange flicks of flames start to show themselves at the control panel. Colin let the Wendigo and glanced at the fire. "We need to get off this boat." Colin stood up on all fours and glanced at Kitty. She shook her head no. "Kitty, we have to go." "No, I want to watch him burn." She stood up and grabbed the creature by the antlers. She dragged the heavy body towards the door with what little strength she had left. "What are you doing? Either help me or shut up." Kitty cursed at Colin. The lion grabbed the Wendigo in his jaws and followed her out of the control room. Kitty walked towards the edge of the railing and looked at the bottom of the boat, which was in orange and yellow flames. Kitty grabbed the other half of the Wendigo and helped Colin lift the body over the railing. They let Jack's unconscious body fall over the side and land in the flames below. Colin did his best to spit the nasty blood out his mouth as Kitty watched the body burn below. An explosion rocked the boat and caused Kitty to fall on top of Colin. "We need to go jump," Colin yells as he leaps over the side of the boat and falls towards the water. He hit the water below hard and surfaced looking for Kitty. She was still on the boat. "Kitty, come on." She was so hard-headed. She was still watching the Wendigo burn. Another explosion in the back rocked the vessel. The sound of wood cracking and metal bending rang out in the night sky. The lions yelled once more. Finally, Kitty snapped out her daze. She hopped on the railing and leaped off. Just as she jumped, a large explosion hit the cat and she flew into the water. Colin roared as she swam towards where she landed in the water. He frantically looked for her as he doggy paddled with all four paws. Her body slowly surfaces for a moment. She was unconscious, and Colin had to grab the back of her shirt before she sank below. The lion was almost running on empty as he pushed forwards to drag her through the water towards the bank. Colin finally reached the bank of the muddy bank and leapt up. He laid her on the ground and placed his ears to her chest. Thankfully, she was still breathing. Colin scooped her up into his mouth gently as he ran back towards the agency. Chapter 18. Claire had heard word her daughter was living on the outskirts of New Orleans, so the witch decided to go and meet her daughter herself. She was done waiting around for the mermaid to seek her out. She left Jack in charge of her steamboat and exited the docks towards her car. The witch pulled up at Eva's small home and exited her car. This was the place where Jack said she lived. It was not as extravagant as Claire would have imagined. It was nestled back towards the bayou and almost out of sight. The witch walked up the small steps and extended her hand to knock on the door. If the mermaid was not here, then the witch would try the gallery next. Claire knocked again, this time harder than before. Claire heard footsteps and made herself ready to meet her daughter. The door opened and a brunette stood before the witch. "What do you want?" Eva huffed as she glared at the dark Italian woman on her porch. Is that any way to speak to your mother? Claire smirked as she pushed past Eva and made her way inside. The witch looked around in a snooping fashion. I don't even know you, you abandoned me and my father. Eva could not believe this woman just let herself into her home. Is that what he told you, Samuel? Claire finally stopped judging the mermaid's home and turned to face her daughter. It was during a time of war. It would have been safer for you to leave with your father. Plus, if Meph, his father, found out I betrayed him and slept with his son and conceived, he would not be happy. Plus, Meph would have used you like she used your father and I and your brother. Claire added. Like you want to use me? Eva snapped back. I only want to have a relationship with my daughter. Is that so bad? Claire tried to play the victim with pouty eyes and lips. It was so fake, and Eva saw through it. You sent a Wendigo after me. He stuck me in a tank. Eva yelled. I didn't think he would do that. He did. Eva continued to yell. I am sorry, Eva. I just want you to come and stay with me, and we could learn about each other and be a family. Claire smiled and walked towards her daughter. She reached out to touch her, but Eva drew back in disgust. You just want my powers. No, dear. Claire spoke in defense of herself. Yes, Samuel said. But Eva was cut off before she could finish her statement. Samuel is a liar. Claire's true intentions were showing in the way she scorned her daughter. Claire reached out again, but her hand was wrinkled. Evangeline avoids it by pushing Claire's hand away with force. No, I think you are. You don't know me. Nor did you want anything to do with me until my grandfather was thrown into the pit. Now you need me for your powers. Evangeline let Claire have it. Evangeline, please. Reaches out for her Eva once more and the mermaid backs up. Claire's patience was drained. If she would not come with her willingly, then she would force her. Fine, you want to play it this way. Claire extended her hand and used her powers to try and bind Eva in a spell. Eva grunted and she could barely move. What are you doing? Eva grunted in pain as she struggled to move. You will come with me. The witch screamed as she clenched her fist. Eva struggled to get free from the witch's grasp. As he did so, Eva's green eyes were glowing in anger. Eva watched in horror as her mother ran towards her. Eva was finally able to get one hand free. Eva quickly reached for the knife she was using to cut vegetables off the counter bar beside her. As she did so, Claire ran into Eva and into the knife in Eva's hands. The witch made a grunting noise as she stumbled backwards a bit. Eva was finally free from the spell. The mermaid reached out and took the knife from Claire's stomach. Eva then drove it back into Claire a few more times. The witch fell backwards and turned to dust as she hit the floor. Eva opened her blood-stained hands and let the bloody steel drop from her hands. It landed on the floor with a thud. The mermaid was in shock as she stood there frozen in fear. It was the first time she had ever killed anyone. Eva then turned and ran out of her home. She needed to see her brother. On her way across the docks, Evangeline walked like a zombie. Giovanni spotted her from the docks and made his way toward her. Eva stopped in her tracks and looked up at the doctor as he advanced towards her. Giovanni noticed something was not right with her. He approached her slowly and calmly. Why are you full of blood? Are you hurt? He asked, looking her over. It is not my blood, was all she said in a low tone. Eva stood there almost limp and lifeless. Oh, who's I asked. Giovanni pulled his hand away from her shirt and looked deep into her eyes. It was as if she wasn't present. My mother's. Eva spoke coldly now. The tone she used, Giovanni never heard come from her before. Was he too late to save his innocent mermaid? Eva, I must confess something. Giovanni could not lie to her anymore. His solemn tone made Eva snap out of the daze she was in. The doctor was always so formal and portentous. What? Her words were sharp and almost cruel. Like what else was she to accept this night? I love you, and he fumbled a bit. Eva knew something was definitely wrong. The doctor never fumbled his words. And what, Gio? She almost screamed. I want you to leave with me. This is all nonsense. Samuel is going to start a war. Innocent supernatural will die. He finally got part of the truth out. Since when do you care? I care about you, but I am also a doctor, Eva. He gripped the sides of her arms. You used to torture people to death. She glared at him, not buying this new Giovanni. I was trying to find cures. He let her go and spat out. You are a hypocrite. Eva pointed a bloody finger at him as she screamed. Eva, I am trying to protect you. Everyone, it seems. Don't worry about me. I can take care of myself. She turned to push past him in order to walk to her brother's boat. If you don't come with me and this war starts, the judges will come, and we will die. He walked after her, trying to get her to see reason. Let them. Her words were cold. This was no longer the woman he met and fell in love with. She was once a light in his darkness. Her innocence and compassion gave him hope in this cruel world, and now the world had changed her to her true nature, a cold-blooded killer, just like him. Eva. The vampire did his best to reconcile and retrieve something of the old Eva, but it was all gone. No, I am tired of hiding and being used and being afraid of everything. She stood on the ramp, a few inches higher than him now. Her glowing green eyes looked down at him in a judgment manner. All I wanted to do was leave and have a life with you, but if you wish to stay, then fine. Giovanni brings her arm and brings her downward towards him. He removed his mask and pressed his lips hard against hers. Eva tried to wiggle out of his grip and kiss. As he kisses her, his other hand then injects her with a fast-acting poison. Eva's eyes went white as she then went limp in his arms. I am sorry, Eva. I tried to save you, to save us. Giovanni teared up and she brushed his fingers through her hair. He watched her eyes go wide in fear and shock as her breath was labored. Eva slowly seized and shook in his arms. The whole time Giovanni held her close and wept over what he had to do. If anyone else would have killed Eva, the doctor would have gone on a rampage, and more people would have been injured. He knew the judges were the best bet for this world. They were the light in the up-and-coming darkness. A balance between the two worlds. The vampire was just an old relic of a dark past. Her body finally went limp, and Giovanni picked her up bridal style. I am so sorry, he spoke in Italian, his native tongue, as he lowered her dead body back into the water she loved so much. He stood there and watched her sink out of sight. Giovanni quickly wiped the tears away and reached in his coat for his cell phone. The doctor then calls Jacob, the young judge, and tells him that he killed Eva and he is leaving the state. He also gave the judge the information about where Samuel will be in Texas. The fallen angel was there to pick up the virus from one of the pharmaceutical companies. Giovanni's words were brief and grimacing. He then tossed the phone into the water and placed the mask back on his face. He knew now that Eva was dead, so was all hope for him to turn back into that human he once was. He would now leave New Orleans knowing that ultimately the wolf Jamal would track him and kill him. Chapter 19. As soon as Jacob hung up the phone, he ran towards Colin's office. He let the lion know what Giovanni had told him. The lion reached up and scratched the stumble on his chin. We need to go after Henry Jr. now. When he finds out his sister is dead, he will rage and tear this city up. Quayle stood up from behind his desk as he grabbed his suit jacket. Kitty was sleeping on the couch across from the desk, but she heard everything. When the lion moved, the cat quickly stood up as well. You tell Pam and the angel to go after Samuel. Let them contact Michael, the judge in Austin who works for the Black Files. They can aid Pamela get Samuel. We need to handle the merman and his pirates here. Divide and conquer. Colin explains. Jacob agreed. He was the judge of this region, But Jacob respected and took Colin's decision as the correct way to handle this situation. Kitty, go and tell the other agents in the building that we need to move now. Kitty nodded and took off out of the office. Colin then walked towards Jacob. Now, since you two have history, Henry will try and play on that to get you upset. You must not let him. Focus on the task. If we bring him in alive, so be it, but if you have to cut him down, it is justified. Colin gave Jacob a word of advice. He didn't want the young judge to go in guns blazing and lose focus, but he also did not want Jacob to feel guilty for killing the merman. I will do my best to complete this task at hand, and give fair judgment, as I was ordained by God to do. Colin patted the young judge's shoulders and smiled. There you go, mate, now let's go settle this, huh? The judges and other agents loaded up and took off towards the docks. The agents and judges pulled up at the quiet docks. The sky was cloudy, and the dark clouds hid the moon, making the night even darker. The smell of rain lingered in the air as Jacob walked alongside Colin towards the fancy pirate ship. The few agents they were able to gather followed Kitty, who was right behind Colin. Why are you here? You have rules, right? You can't just show up at my business like this without just cause. Henry slid down a rope and stood on the side of the ship. We have proof, you fish muppet. Colin was in no mood for wordplay. He, as well as everyone else, was there to bring these criminals in. Giovanni told us everything. Plus, you are to stand trial for the death of my mother, as well as the crimes against the people of New Orleans, Jacob added. Little judge, you think I will get convicted for that? I had no dealing with that. Why don't you run off and handle your city and leave me and my boys alone? Go on, shoe orphan. Your men did, and they took orders from you. And as I recall, you are an orphan just like me. Jacob grit his teeth. Colin gave Jacob a look, reminding him not to let the merman get to him. Me and my sister will rule this city, and you judge. I will keep alive to let you see what we do with your city. Henry walked along the wooden edge of the boat, spouting off nonsense. Colin was not one to have a long drawn-out conversation. The lion did not want to hear his villain speech. Eva is dead, you trout. Colin spat out. What? Henry almost fell off his own boat when he heard the words. Her little fang bang off the lass. Colin clarified. Kitty tried to hide her smile as she found Colin's words bold and a bit comical. Henry screamed with rage and pulled out his cutlass pirate sword. The merman then yelled something in his native tongue, and the docks began to swarm with pirates. The agents turned and began to battle them. Colin turned to Jacob as he began to remove his jacket and unbutton his shirt. He was going to shift into his lion to make quick work of the minion supernatural pirates. You take care of Henry. We will deal with these pirates. Jacob nodded and removed his bow staff Michael had made him. The young judge then backed away as he watched Colin turn from a man into a large lion. Colin let out a roar and leapt over Jacob to tackle the advancing pirates. Jacob's attention then turned to Henry, who was climbing up rope shroud on the masts of his ship. The Japanese-American took off and flipped up onto the boat from the dock, and ran along the wooden main deck towards the mainmast. Jacob reached out and grabbed a rope as he ran. Using force, he jumped up and swung himself on one of the main wood poles that held the sails. Since they were docked, the large sails were wrapped in ropes and tucking under the wooden beams. Jacob looked up and watched Henry continue to climb towards the crow's nest. Jacob did his best to follow, but Henry turned to swing his sword at the judge. Jacob blocked the swings of the sword with his staff, but the staff worked better in two hands. The merman was able to knock the bow staff out of the judge's hands. Jacob watched it fall to the dock of the ship and rolled. The judge knew he had to use the family sword for the family's honor. He was so focused on using his bow staff, the weapon he was used to, instead of using it to correct weapons for the fight. Jacob then had to avoid the sword slashes, and she held onto the rope that ran vertical along the mass. Henry reached the large crow's nest, and began to cut the ropes Jacob was clinging to. Jacob knew he had to reach the top before the rope snapped. The judge used his feet and agility to push off the large wooden beam to flip up and over Henry. He landed softly onto the crow's nest. He may have been human, but he was blessed with supernatural abilities. His whole life he trained those abilities in order to fight creatures like Henry. Jacob reached for his family's katana and quickly pulled it from its sheath. As Henry brought down his large cutlass, it sparked when it hit the judge's katana. "Nice sword, Judge Boy," Henry sneered as he lifted his sword again to swing at the judge. Jacob was just as swift with his own sword. The two men fought along the circle of the crow's nest, their blades sparking in the night air as lightning and thunder rumbled in the background. Large drops of rain began to break forth from heaven and land on the ship and surrounding area. Jacob had to not only keep up with the merman's wild thrashing, but now he needed to factor in the soon-to-be slick conscious and watch his footwork. Below, Colin fought alongside his men and Kitty. A few of his agents were injured, but none so far were killed. Kitty backflipped and landed on the lion as he charged after a large pirate that stood over 7 feet tall. The lion leaps up and digs his claws deep into the shoulders of the pirate. Kitty then flips over and brings the knives down, slicing him down the middle. The lion falls with the large brute and begins to swap away the others like flies. Kitty's knife work also makes short work of the men and supernatural beings. As the rain started to pour down, the agents were finally able to take over the scene. Dead pirates littered the ground alongside injured agents. The water washed the blood away and down to the waterway where the ship was docked. "Call in the rest of the team to get these guys booked. Also call an ambulance for our injured." Colin yells in the rain. "Where is Jacob?" The wet mane dropped in front of the talking lion as he tried to shake the water off. It was not used due to the steady downpour. He looked at Kitty, who was pointing towards the ship. The lion turned and used his paw to move his hair from his eyes. Colin's golden eyes watched Jacob and Henry's sword duel. Kitty went to take off to help him, but Colin used his paw to block her. No, it is his fight. For his family's honor. Kitty understood and put her knives away. "Help me find my clothes." Colin turned and looked around for his discarded attire. Henry was far older and skilled at walking on the wood beams of the ship. Jacob was smaller and quicker, however, and the judge used this to his advantage. The slick and raining conditions did not aid the judge in this fight. "You think you can take me down, Judge?" Henry's grins as she fought furiously. "You will die like your mother. Alone, scared, calling out for your God." Jacob tried not to let the words get to him, but years of pent-up anger began to flow. Jacob slashed and took some of Henry's beard off. The sword drew blood, and the force made Henry's body turn. This angered the merman, and he turned to swing his sword at the young male, but Jacob used his katana to block the blows. Henry brought his sword down, but it missed Jacob. It hit a rope the judge was standing on, and the force made Jacob lose his footing. He slipped and fell down towards the main deck, however his foot was caught in the rope ladder, and it stopped his fall. The merman jumped down from the mast and onto the floor below. He watched Jacob wiggle to get free from the ropes, like a fly trapped in a spider's web. "Let all see that the grandson of Mephistopheles, son of Henry the High Merman, has struck down this judge. I will take ownership of this city. I will bring the humans and your kind under my subjection. You will serve us like the dogs you are. You will bow." Henry went to run his sword through Jacob, but the judge moved just in time. The merman's sword went through the rope holes of the net. The merman stumbled a bit and fell into the net to the left of the judge. Jacob then elbowed the merman with his left elbow. Jacob was still upside down since his foot was still entangled. He then brought his katana that was in his right hand down hard onto the merman's back. "Say hello to God for me." Jacob twisted the katana inside of the merman. Henry let out a scream as he fell to his knees. Jacob was able to get his foot loose, and the judge landed on the dock beside Henry. With fluid motions, Jacob removed the family katana from the back of the large mermaid, and used all his might to swing downwards. The merman's head rolled off across the deck and into the water below. Jacob then went to his knees, bowed his head and held the sword in both hands up towards heaven. "Thank you, Lord of Lords, for allowing me to bring my family honor." He prayed in Japanese as the katana lay in his hands above his head. The pouring rain slowly stopped, but Jacob continued to pray and give thanks to God for aiding him in this fight. When the judge finished, he stood up from the deck. He bowed and placed the katana back into its sheath. The judge then exited the boat down the ramp and walked towards Colin and Kitty. "I think you will do just fine in taking care of this region." Colin smiled. "Thank you for your help, Judge Jameson. And yours, Miss Kitty." Kitty and Jacob exchanged a bow. "The agency and I are always around to help you look after this city. Never hesitate to ask for help or advice." Colin held out his hand for Jacob to shake. The young judge took Colin's hand and shook it firmly. "We will clean this mess up here. You go get you some rest, kid, you earned it." Colin patted Jacob's back. Jacob's lip curved into a smirk as he let Colin's hand go. "I might sleep for a week after this." "Amen." Colin agrees. "I wish I could, but I have a ton of paperwork to fill out on this little fiasco. Not to mention the other cases that need handling." He added, "I will come by in a few days and help you with the cases. This is my city after all." Jacob added, "That would be appreciated. Thank you." Colin nodded and watched Jacob walk away. Chapter 20. The Black Files. Austin, Texas. Raphael and Pamela teleported into the Black Files building. The two popped inside the main office building where Anthony and Michael desks were. "Jesus!" Anthony yelled as he was startled by the sudden appearance of the large blonde angel and dark-haired female. Michael, however, was unfazed as he sat behind his computer typing. "Hey Pam," was all he said. Anthony had his hand on his chest, still trying to calm down. "Easy there, mate, it is just me and Pammy here." He laughed. "Who is me?" "And you could have used the door, mate," Anthony mocked Ralph's Australian accent. "Name's Raphael, Archangel." The friendly angel went towards Anthony's desk and sat on the edge of the desk. Pam shook her head and walked towards Michael's desk, which was in front of Anthony's. "Where's everyone?" she asked as she watched the annoyed Anthony listen to Raphael talking. "Joseph and Samara are out looking at wedding invitations. The other agents are busy in other cases, so you are stuck with me and Anthony here." Michael looked up for his computer screen with a grin. Suddenly the kitchen door opens, and Tim walks out with a bagel and a coffee in his hands. He wasn't even paying attention to the others. "Who is that?" Pamela asked, watching the Spaniard make his way into the other door leading to the dorms. "Tim, he is an ex. Well, not an ex-thief. He still takes things. But he used to be a criminal. Now he is an informant working with us." Michael explains. "You have a criminal working with you?" Pam lifted an eyebrow. "Hey, that criminal helped us go against Mammon. He used a holy grenade on him and blew the fallen angel up, Holy Grail style." Pamela could help but let out a laugh at that. "Yeah, I had to rinse the devil out of my hair for an hour." "How did he survive that?" "He is cursed like Kenny from South Park. Like whom? He can die. He has advanced reconstruction abilities. Cut him up into the pieces and he will come back together. That can be dangerous. Someone with those abilities would make a formidable enemy." "Yeah, that is why we are friends with him. Plus he is quite the character, and he give Joe a hard time. It is hysterical." Pam shook his head a bit while smiling down at Michael. You all here are just having a good time, huh? Pam shook her head a bit disappointed. What? We have to have a little fun, otherwise you end up like Anthony. Michelle pointed. What? Anthony yelled. He didn't hear everything the two had said, but he heard his name. We had word that Samuel's location was at one of his pharmaceutical companies. I thought Samuel reigned over Las Vegas. Since Mammon is gone as well as meth, Samuel is extending his territory. Pam explains. The time to attack is now. Michael, he has a virus that can cause a lot of humans to perish. Michael's smile faded into a frown. Where is this company? Michael asked as he stood up from his desk chair. Corpus Christi. Really? That is like 5 hours from here. Michael huffed and ran a hand through his dark hair. Easy mate, I will have you there in a jiffy. Raphael spoke up. How? Anthony asked as he rose a brow. Yeah, how? You can't teleport or fly a whole team out there. No, but I think I can manage you 3. He paused, counted and nodded. I think I can do that. Ralph reassured himself. Think? Anthony shook his head no. No big guy, I am not flying out there. Anthony protested. So, you are going to drive all the way down there? Michael rose a brow. No, someone has to stay and watch L's sticky fingers. You Wonder Woman and Crocodile Dundee here can go. I will hold down the fort. Anthony rolled back under his desk and started clicking away at his computer. Michael was not going to argue with Anthony. He picked up his gladius sword that was propped by his desk and placed it on his back. Just call and let Joe know everything that is going on, please. Michael walked towards Pamela and waited for Raphael. You sure you don't want to come? The angel joked as he walked towards the judges. Anthony flipped the angel off and went back to his work. 2 judges and an angel, this should be interesting. Michael spoke out loud as Raphael wrapped his arms around Pam's waist and Michael's shoulders. The 3 disappear, leaving the agent alone in the building. Corpus Christi. The angel landed outside of the 15-story office building. Michael adjusted himself and made his way towards the building. Pam was right beside him, followed by Raphael. So, what is the plan? Pamela asked. I have no earthly idea. Michael confesses. Go in, stop Samuel. Raphael spoke up. Pam rolled her eyes. Obviously, she added. Michael couldn't help but laugh at her sarcastic tone. Are we even sure that Samuel is here? Michael asked. He is. Raphael's tone went from joyful to serious. The 3 walked into the back of the building and made their way towards the elevator. They boarded the silver elevator, and the 2 judges looked at the angel. Which floor? Michael asked. The angel pressed the button to the 13th floor. That figures. Michael rolled his eyes. You know the Fallen and their theatrics. Pam added. The elevator jolted and took them towards the floor. When the doors opened, the guards opened fire. Raphael's white and golden wings extended to block him and the judges from being shot. The bullets hit his wing and fell to the bottom of the elevator. Michael removed his sword, and Pamela took out her sai. She twirls her dagger-like weapons and glances up at the angel. If you guys were into relationships and such, I would marry you. She teased before sliding under the wing to attack. The angel grins and looks over at Mike. Not my type, big guy. He joked and followed after Pamela. Ralph took out his boomerang and threw it towards the guards. It smacked 2 in the jaw and ricocheted around the lab-like floor. Pam used her Sias to stab 1 guard before leaping up to cut another. Michael used his sword to slash the guard that Pam ran past. The boomerang flew past Mike and hit a table, causing the glasses to fall over. Mike knocked an advancing guard out with the butt on his gladius sword as he turned to face Ralph. Hey, surf's up, can we refrain from breaking the glasses? Who knows what they can strain? Mike yells. Calm down, gladiator. Ralph rolled his eyes and continued to fight alongside the judges. I would expect a fallen angel to have tougher security, Michael shouted. I am sure this is just to the first level. You know, each level they get harder, Pam replied. This isn't Spock's. Mike grunts as he makes short work of a vampire guard. I prefer PlayStation, Pam winks. And you fuss about me for playing around, Michael added before dodging a bullet. I have no idea what you two are talking about, but can you stop flirting and focus? The angel pointed to the creatures coming towards them. Ghouls. Pam tilted her head as she looked at the creatures. They were tall and had long appendages with whitish pale flesh. They wore an ninja-like face covering and black wrapped cloth around their bodies. A ghoul is a desert-dwelling, shape-shifting demon that can assume the guise of an animal, especially a hyena. It lures unwary people into the desert wastes or abandoned places to slay and devour them. The creature also preys on young children, drinks blood, steals coins, and eats the dead, then taking the form of the person most recently eaten. Samuel must have brought them from his desert palace in Nevada. Pam glared at the dozens of creatures that slowly approached. Ever dealt with ghouls while you were in Arabia with Raiden? Pam asked. No, it was just Moggy, Michael replied without taking his eyes off him. Raphael, why don't you go pay Sammy boy a visit while we make short work of these? Pamela spoke sweetly to her angel friends. Alright, you two have fun, mates. I promise you I will let you get a few licks in on Sammy boy. Raphael's huge wings opened up. He then flew upwards and over the ghouls. The wind from his wings made the rest of the glasses and papers fly around and hit the ground. Good thing those were not the viruses in the glass jars. Otherwise, Angel Soft would have started the plague off. Do you always complain this much? Pam asked as she tossed her Sia at an approaching ghoul. It landed in its forehead, and the thing exploded into the smoke and ash. Complain? No, I am just stating a fact. Michael huffed as ran towards the ghouls. He dodged the first one's claws and slashed the advancing one behind it. The dead ghoul exploded into ash like the first. So, they explode when they die, Mike pointed out. Pam jumped on a desk and flipped over a couple of ghouls. She twirls around, slashing and stabbing with her twin daggers. Michael kicked back on Ghoul as he brought down his gladius sword on another. The room was filled with grunts from the judges and exploding ash and smoke from the ghouls. Michael went to one knee to allow for Pam to jump off his back to slam her Tusay down on a few ghouls. She pushed through the smoke to be met with a punch to the face. She went backwards, but Michael caught her with one arm. As he held on to her, Mike used his gladius to stab the ghoul in the chest and bring the sword upwards. He turned his face to avoid the ash and smoke. His face was inches from Pamela's. The two judges were breathing heavily as they gazed into each other's eyes. The moment was interrupted when Ralph was tossed through the wall and landed in the cabinet of liquids. Michael lifted Pam up, and the two judges watched as Samuel walked through the hole in the wall. I have had better entrances, but what can I say? Samuel spoke as he unbuttoned the buttons on the sleeves of his silk shirt. He then rolled the sleeves up to his elbow as he looked at the mess. Raphael stood up and glared at the fallen angel. Pamela charged Samuel, swinging her sail like a mad woman. Michael was not far behind. Samuel quickly pulled out his twin-blade swords. The fallen angel then blocked Pamela's daggers with one blade and parried with Michael using the other. Sam kicked Pam away and turned to bring both blades down on Mike. Pam went flying, but Raphael caught her with one arm. Raphael sat her down quickly before throwing his boomerang towards Samuel with force. The thing hit Sam in the leg and made him stumble a bit sideways. Raphael charged, caught his boomerang and tackled Sam back through the walls towards the office. Michael steadied himself and ran after the two angels. Pam was right behind Michael, ready to fight once more. The office was a modern-day looking office, except the walls were aligned with mirrors. Mike watched in horror as Sam and Raphael fist fought, jumping from one mirror to the next. It looked like an old-school cartoon the way they went out one, across the room to the other, and vice versa. What kind of Doctor Strange, Scooby-Doo stuff is this? Michael yelled in horror. Quickly, break the mirrors. Pam ignored his jokes as she ran along the right side of the room. Using the butt of her Sia, she began to break the mirrors that hung along the wall of the large office. Michael ran on the other side of the office and did the same thing. Silver glass shattered and fell to the ground like rain. Samuel noticed what they were doing in the heat of the battle with his brother, and he needed to stop them. He sucker-punched Raphael and tossed him out of the mirror and across the room with force. Sam then began to emerge from the mirror. Raphael flew past Pam and slammed into the mirror that was in front of her. Pam knew she needed to keep Samuel distracted, so they could finish busting the mirrors. The female judge used her speed to the best of her advantage, but the fallen one was just as fast, if not quicker. Samuel rushed towards Pamela and knocked the safe from her hand. He then wrapped his hands around her throat, squeezing. Michael stopped breaking the mirrors that were along his side of the room, and jolted towards Samuel. The judge leapt into the air with his sword in hand. He brought down his sword onto Samuel, cutting the fallen angel's back. Sam screamed in pain and let the female judge go as he tried to turn to face Michael. Ralph finally shook the feeling of passion out, and quickly caught his breath. The angel then slammed his fist into the wall beside him with all his might. Not only did the rest of the mirrors on the wall shatter, but the wall cracked all the way down the side of the building. Windows and walls around the floor they were staying also shattered from the angel's fist. The epic force sent shards of glass everywhere. Pam covered her face as she laid on the floor trying to catch her breath from being choked. Michael used Samuel as a shield from the glass that flew. The shards sliced the fallen angel, but the wounds were not very severe for him. The angel then threw his boomerang to finish off the last two mirrors on the opposite wall. The wooden and metal boomerang ricocheted off them and found Sam's head as a target. The boomerang hit the fallen on with force, knocking him off balance, allowing Mike to get the upper hand in the sword fight. The judge could tell that Samuel was starting to grow tired and hurt from his injuries. Pamela tried to leg sweep Samuel, but he jumped over her and flipped onto his desk that was a few feet away. Michael was grateful. The judge needed a second to catch his breath. Pamela quickly sprang up from the ground and braced herself to continue to fight. Michael gripped his sword and glared at the fallen angel that was on the desk in front of them. Ralph gripped his boomerang in one hand and flew towards Samuel with speed and force. Sam used his sword to knock the boomerang away, but Raphael gripped Samuel's arm and twisted his wrist. The cracking sound and Samuel's scream rang out across the office as the fallen angel dropped his sword. The two then proceed to fist fight until Samuel gets the upper hand again. Samuel picked Raphael up and then slammed the angel down on the desk and pushed him through the reflected surface. The angel sunk into it and disappeared to wherever Samuel sent him. Now that is not good. Michael shook his head and ran towards the desk. He knew he had to destroy it as well. While Michael distracted Samuel with a sword duel, Pam picked up a lampstand and proceeded to try and break the mirror like a glass desk Sam was standing on. When it cracked, he turned his focus toward Pamela, but Michael grabbed the fallen angel's legs and yanked him down. The angel fell down on the desk hard, causing the cracked glass to shatter. Samuel's back hit the floor, and Michael brought down his sword. The fallen angel rolled out of the way, but couldn't avoid the lampstand that was swung like a bat at his face by Pam. Michael went to stab the angel, but Samuel dodged it again. The sword got stuck in the floor for a second, and Samuel kicked Michael hard in the face. The judge rolled backwards, almost knocked out. Pam swung the metal lampstand again, but Sam caught it this time. The fallen angel quickly stood up and yanked the stand and the female judge forward. He went to swing at her with his free hand, but Pam blocked the punch. She then let the lamp go and got a few body shots into his gut. Suddenly Raphael came flying back inside and tackled Samuel against the back wall. The force of the flight caused Pam to fall backwards onto the ground. The wall behind them also cracked and looked as if it was going to give way and fall down to the street below. Pam's eyes went to Michael, who was still on the ground groaning. "Michael, we have to end this," she yelled as the judge tried to stand up. He spit blood onto the floor and checked to make sure he didn't lose a tooth. Pam did her best to think how on earth they were going to defeat this fallen angel. Pamela's eyes suddenly noticed a small pocket mirror in the rubble that was once a desk. She quickly slides across the floor and grabs a hold of it. Michael took off running towards Raphael and Samuel, who were fighting, but paused when Pamela yelled at him. "Jack in a box," she yells, and tosses the mirror towards Michael. Michael caught it and oddly enough understood what she was saying. They needed to trap Samuel inside. You couldn't really kill an angel, they were eternal, but like how God trapped the other fallen ones, the judge needed to trap Samuel. As Raphael got the upper hand and had Samuel in a chokehold, Michael slid to a halt in front of Sam. He opened the mirror and yelled, "In the name of Jesus, I bind you in this mirror. You will not never leave this place of dwelling." Samuel screamed as he was sucked inside. His own powers backfired against him. Michael held onto it with all his remaining strength, as the fallen angel tried to fight being sucked into the mirror. Raphael took a few cheap shots, knocking the fallen angel inside the tiny mirror. The force of the fallen angel being sucked in causes Michael to fall backwards. He quickly closed the mirror and yelled, "Go! Go! Power Rangers!" He looked up at Ralph, who had no clue what he was talking about. His head then went back to look at Pam upside down, shaking her head in disappointment. Samara would have enjoyed that. He frowns. It was decided for Judge Mike to bring the small mirror back to the Black Files agency. He would bring it to the count the following day after he rested and healed from his wounds. The Council of Judges would want to have such an artifact that contained Samuel under lock and key. He tossed the thing on his desk and made his way towards the kitchen area. When the kitchen door closed, the door that led to the dorms opened. Tim walked in and wandered desk to desk looking for batteries for the remote in his hand. His hair was messy, and he wore an old robe and slippers. He paused when he noticed the mirror on Michael's desk. Tim lifted a brow and looked over the beautifully etched mirror. This would make a good gift for Samar. He thought out loud. He still had not gotten her an engagement gift, so he decided to take the mirror and give it to the little blonde. "Hey, why are you still here?" Anthony yells as he comes back from the bathroom. The swift thief placed the mirror in his pocket and turned to show the agent the remote. "No, why do you stay here? Aren't you rich or something?" Anthony crossed his arms. "Not really, the count and FBI seized most of my assets. So, you want my help, you are stuck with me, amigo." Tim whistled and walked towards the kitchen. Chicago, the Black Files agency. Arthur Montgomery, the bounty hunter judge, brought the whiny wizard through the busy office. He walked him straight to Mark Landry's office in the back of the building, and sat him down. The dark-skinned male that sat behind the desk just looked up at Arthur and then towards Merlin. "Why did you bail out on me, Merlin?" Mark leaned back in his desk chair and shook his head in disappointment. Merlin reached out and took the plaque of his desk that said Commissioner and played with it nervously. Arthur snatched the plaque out of Merlin's hands, smacked him with it and put it back. "Ouch!" Merlin rubbed his head. "Are you gonna answer the man?" The judge threatened Merlin with a closed fist. All right. I owed Collie a lot of well souls. The demoness wasn't happy and ordered a hit on me. It doesn't help that she is running with the Rees these days. Merlin spills the beans. She not only sent her people after me, but the human mobsters that whirled under them. You know, all those fallen angels and their children oversee the mafia. The mafia answers to them, and when you have that much pull, you can't really escape. Merlin explained. Why is Ares around here? Wasn't he out west stirring up trouble with North Korea? You didn't know? Ares has a soft spot for the Indian demoness. It is probably the skulls around her neck she wears. Merlin made a disgusted face. If you want to take down Ares, I know one of his sons. Pepper. He ran with me on cloud bounties before. He does not have any allegiance to anyone. How is that helpful? If he neither serves us of the judges, nor the kingdom of darkness, how can he help us? Well, he really hates his dad. If given the chance, he would kill him. I am sure you can provide him to come and help you, Luca and Lacey out. It is worth a shot. Anyways, this idiot is all yours, Mark. Nice seeing you again. Mark stood up and shook the judge's hand. Thank you. Mark shook Arthur's and then sat back down at his desk. The commissioner of the Black File Chicago glared at Merlin and waited to speak until the door to his office was closed. Look, I don't have the time to sit here and beat info out of you. You tell me everything I need to know, and you can stay here in our protection. Deal. Author's note: I hope you enjoy this book as much as I enjoyed writing it. I wanted a Christian-based supernatural series that was as much biblical-based as I could make it. There are witches, vampires, werewolves and demons out there. I wanted to show how all are evil, and dabbling in the darknesses of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh but the supernatural. Ephesians 6:12 King James Version, KJV 12 For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. We must not participate or condone these things. We must be separate and not like the world. I hope this book series is entertaining as well as informative. I pray you search the scriptures for yourself. I'd like to thank the Lord Jesus, my parents, my husband, my pastor, and my friend Valerie. Valerie and I have been writing together for 5 years now. This story contains both of our characters we have made over the years. She is also working on a few projects of her own that I hope you go and check out. I would also like to thank Rebecca, my beta reader.